on today's stage 13 as the riders are once again separated by a little bit more at the top of the standings. Rodriguez getting some breathing room over Contador and Froome. Valverde slipping to just over a minute back. It's still very much, though, a four-rider race. Steve Schlanger, Todd Gugulski, and looking at what should be a sprinter stage.
Kolb in the green jersey as the best sprinter so far has gotten, count them, 4 field sprints in a row. Every field sprint so far in this bike race this year. He wants to make it number 5 today. Today is 172.8 kilometers. It's about 107 miles. Still in the Galicia region of northwestern Spain. The guys started out under slightly windy conditions. No categorized climbs today, a little bit lumpy as they headed over to the coast and continuing small bumps in the road before the finish. His Argo Shimano team director told me yesterday they're riding all in for a field sprint. Expect to see them on the front a lot.
This was the start earlier today in the capital of Galicia, Santiago de Compostela, being used as a Vuelta stage start for the first time in almost 3 decades. Right in front of the cathedral that serves as a shrine for St. James the Great. Very regal start as the leaders of the various classifications were at the head of the peloton. And now moving forward, we pick things up live here much deeper in the stage. They have already gone through 1 of 2 intermediate sprints on the stage. No categorized climbs today, and right now a pretty pedestrian tempo. We have a 7-man breakaway just a few minutes up the road, but no threats on the general classification. Just under 70 kilometers left to go right now, and the gap is under 3 minutes to these 7 riders. And once again, like yesterday, it was a very frantic pace after the casual rollout as several different riders from many different teams were trying to get in a breakaway. At one point, we had a group of over 20 that was up the road, but everything was brought back, and now we've settled on these 7, as you can see on the screen. Some interesting names, a lot of guys with track backgrounds, but take note of the fact that nobody inside of 40 minutes on the general classification. Linus Gerdeman is the highest placed rider, and he's over 43 minutes down.
And that's what ends up happening in these grand tours after so many days of racing. They want to let guys go from the peloton that pose no risk in the overall classification. So that is ultimately the group they let slip away. But look at Argo Shimano. Just like the director told me yesterday, Marijn Zeeman, he said they're not going to bluff at all. They're going to ride the front and ride for a field sprint every single one of the next 4 days of the race that have field sprint opportunities throughout the rest of this race.
Now a day off for Katusha, the team of overall leader Joaquin rode in the break. No big climbs on the profile today. They can sit back and let the sprinters teams do the work, and that's exactly how things have unfolded. Argo Shimano setting the pace because John Degenkolb has proved to be the fastest sprinter at this year's Vuelta. He's won all 4 of the field sprints, and also because the Liquigas Cannondale team has their top sprinter in the breakaway today, Elia Viviani. Red line is where the race is right now. We have some undulation to the terrain the rest of the way, but nothing serious in the remaining kilometers all the way to the town of Ferrol. Liquigas Cannondale is the team lined up behind Argo Shimano. And the peloton 241 behind the 7-man group that is coming up on the final 60 kilometers. But we just caught the tail end of the 7-man breakaway, the rider in the green and white. That is Elia Viviani. So he is the top sprinter for Liquigas, and no doubt the best sprinter if it would come down to this group at the finish line, so he would have a good shot for the stage win, but it doesn't look like these guys are going to get enough time in order to stay away all the way to the line today.
Pretty unlikely, especially given the aspirations of Argo Shimano. There are 4 days, including today, left in this stage race that legitimately could be field sprints, and there are 5 summit finishes coming up. And because the summit finishes put the general classification guys in the hunt for the points jersey, Argos has to work really hard to make sure nothing stays away on one of these flat days to give Degenkolb a chance at that points jersey.
Their largest margin was just inside of 4 minutes. That was at its highest point, so they never got much rope to work with from Argos Shimano and the other sprinters' teams here. They've been keeping them on a pretty tight leash, and now down to 2.5 minutes with just about 60 kilometers left to go.
And even though John Degenkolb is wearing the points jersey, he actually sits third in that classification. Rodriguez has 119 points, Degenkolb has 103, and sandwiched in between is Alejandro Valverde. And that is a result of all those uphill finishes where Degenkolb comes up with a big goose egg every day on points on those days.
Another warm but dry day in northwestern Spain and a flat stage ahead of 3 consecutive summit finishes this weekend at the Vuelta. Again, a look at our 7 leaders. Signature breakaway on stage number 13. Now down to just over 50 kilometers left to go, and their lead still over 2 minutes. Some interesting names here, including Simon Clark of Ulrika Green Edge, who's already won a stage. He captured the win on stage number 4. It was a summit finish, and he was part of a day-long breakaway that was reduced to 2 riders, and he won just ahead of Tony Martin of Omega Pharma Quickstep.
Great win for him, surviving from that breakaway. His first Grand Tour stage victory. Guy who's been knocking on the door for some wins for a long time over the last few years. Often finds himself in breakaways, but just hadn't been able to put it together yet.
Now for the 4th consecutive stage, the riders are proceeding along the water, the Galician coast of northwestern Spain. Another postcard day, late summer in northwestern Spain. Blue water on one side, green hills on the other, stone bridges for the riders to carry them across from one landmass to the next. So the Tourism Board of Spain has certainly get their money's worth here in this second week of their Spanish Grand Tour.
Well, I got to say, I'm a real fan of this region of Spain. I was not very familiar with it before this year's Vuelta, and it is absolutely stunning.
This is the field, still led by Argos Shimano, team in the white.
Hey, note to spectators, if you're ever out there watching a bike race, do not stand on a bridge on a sidewalk where you have nowhere to get out of the way if things go bad in the peloton. I've seen some pretty tough crashes on bridges that can involve spectators.
Back end of the field here as they work on the break just ever so slightly down to right around 2 minutes. Now we're down to 190 riders now left in the field. A couple of abandons, Pisoni and Hayden Rolston have pulled out. Actually, now that'll take it down to 188 left in the stage. So with those 2 additional riders, we've actually lost more in the last couple of days than we did through the first half of the race. So that makes 10 now for the entire Vuelta who have pulled out.
Last couple days have been trying on the guys. Daniele Ratto pulling out, I believe it was yesterday. It had been several years since a rider from Liquigas Cannondale had actually quit a Grand Tour from that team.
Yeah, they had a remarkable stretch of finishing with all 9 guys at every Grand Tour, and it's really amazing when you consider the attrition and just the bad luck that can occur within a team at a Grand Tour. I mean, you have 9 guys, you have 3 weeks of racing. It's a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong.
Absolutely. And I mean, you take like Lotto Belisol, right now half the team has a virus and they're struggling to continue on. That can take a team out very quickly.
50K with 2 minutes for the group. Again, you mentioned earlier, Nasser Bouhanni, the sprinter for FDJ, has also pulled out of the race. Things really opening up more in favor of John Degenkolb.
Most aggressive from yesterday, Mikel Astarosa. The special number that's red the next day, just to show everybody that you were seeing red the day before.
Well, he was passed in a big hurry. Both he and his teammate Igor Anton, who attacked on that steep, very short climb at the end of stage number 12. And that breakaway came apart, and they were just completely crushed by Contador, Rodriguez, Valverde, and the others who came past him on that very steep climb that got up to close to 30%.
It's just always so incredible to watch Perito Rodriguez on steep finishing climbs do his magic. The guy has been doing that so well now. He's won 6 stages of the Vuelta. Every one of them have been uphill in his career, and most of them have been very short uphill finishes.
He's now in the red jersey for the 9th day here at the Vuelta. But the big question is coming up this weekend. Can he handle the big, high mountains, the long, sustained, grinding climbs that will suit guys like Contador and Froome better than Rodriguez? We haven't seen many of those here at the Vuelta so far. It's all been in Perito's wheelhouse, the short, steep, punchy type finishes. But now we're getting into Contador's territory.
Moncoutier, number 61 here, he's another one of the men that relish the high mountains. He always looks to try and win one of those stages by going away in a breakaway with non-threatening general classification men. But back to your question slash statement there, Steve, about Perito in the big mountains. A lot of people, I think, right now could be lulled into this false belief that Perito is by far the best overall guy placed to win this race. But we have to remember that he is typically, except for earlier this year in the Giro, had a bad day on a high mountain stage of a Grand Tour. So the question is, will he be able to hold it together for the next 10 days of racing?
We saw just a few moments ago how Argo Shimano was really having trouble maintaining that pace. It was kind of coming apart. I mean, it's not easy to do this kind of work. Even though it's a largely flat stage, it's tough to ride out there at the front all day long. Going back to yesterday, when we had that steep uphill finish, Katusha, the team of leader Joaquin Rodriguez, was doing a lot of the work because they had the top spot on the GC. And at one point, Rodriguez said that they were about to pull the plug and give up the chase because it was just too hard. And right when they were about to do that, Movistar just came forward and started to help. And that's why the breakaway came back. So Rodriguez admitted afterwards that it was that close to letting the break go and take the stage.
Yeah, and you could kind of see that developing. It was just like what we were witnessing here not long ago, maybe 5 minutes. Argo Shimano was starting to come unglued. Their guys were starting to open up little gaps. They just didn't have the speed anymore. Then Lotto Belisol came in with a couple of guys. It just breathed that little bit of freshness into the chase, and now it's really coming down again.
It really underscores the math and the calculus that you have to do in a race like this, that you just can't spend too much time doing too much work when you have to save yourself for other moments in the race, like Katusha was doing yesterday. They realized that, you know what, we just can't burn ourselves up doing this. So we're going to chase as long as we can, but if it looks like we're going to compromise ourselves, we're not going to do it long term.
And we do have some crosswinds here that are starting to break up the field, it looks like, as everybody getting pushed over into the left gutter there. It's actually a barricade, so it's a very real, solid gutter. Sometimes in the crosswinds, you'll see guys popping out into the dirt and, you know, going off the road. They don't have that option here.
Metaphorical gutter.
Indeed. A lot of exposure when you're on these causeways and bridges and anywhere close to the coast.
I'm assuming things continue at this pace and that breakaway does come back and it comes down to a field sprint. It's really hard to believe that Degenkolb is not going to win because it's not a technical finish. It's straight in the final kilometer. And we've lost Nasser Bouhanni, the sprinter for FDJ, who pulled out of the race earlier today because of the residual effects of a crash he was in yesterday. He was his biggest challenger in the last sprint. So it's just hard to see anybody else who's going to give Degenkolb a big run for his money.
I think the difference today is that Degenkolb's team really is going to be spent coming into the finish. And so he's going to have less help for positioning, and it's going to cost him. Look at this, Jürgen Vandenbroek sitting at the back of the group that's been spit out the back in the crosswind. So Degenkolb's good. He's got his work cut out for him today. This is this may end up being the hardest yet stage for him to win, even though he's proven to be the fastest.
Down to 1:15. Kickstarting the weekend out at the Vuelta for the folks in northwestern Spain today, watching the final 25K of stage number 13. Here is the field, stretched out a little bit more now, as the gap is down close to 1 minute for the first time in a while. As far as Degenkolb, he has won his sprints in a variety of fashions. Hasn't always had a true lead out, so really, I think what we've learned from him through his 4 wins to this point is he's clearly the fastest guy. So as long as he doesn't screw it up, it's hard to see him not winning.
Well, you got a certain point there. I think hopefully he will have at least Cone de Court at the end who can help keep him close to the right position and out of the wind. If he's really and truly on his own and he has to do some sort of maneuver in the wind, well, then he's in trouble. But if they can just get him in the top 10 without being in the wind, he seems to have the speed to finish it off.
This is a split that's occurred because of the wind. Split in the field.
One of the Argos men not only at the back of the group, but actually getting tailed off of the back of this group, which has been split out in the crosswind. And if there had been a significant crosswind on that causeway, the field would have been in tatters. As it is, this is a good group of 20, 25 guys that got shed out the back.
Now the attack by Espana.
Guys starting to take advantage of the fact that this has been a very hard chase. This is Tirolongo. He was third a few days back on the day that Philippe Gilbert won stage number 9 into Barcelona. And he has said that he's still hurting a little bit from the crash in the team time trial on day 1.
So stretching things out at the front of the field and really bringing the gap down to the breakaway very swiftly with 11K left to go.
These type of accelerations from the peloton kill the chances of the breakaway because the breakaway cannot make any accelerations. They are steady all the way to the line. That's the only thing that can get them the gap to stay to the finish.
Here's John Degenkolb, and an attack just went by him.
You can see Degenkolb there trying to close down this gap, so he is really being put under a lot of pressure right now. This is going to be a tough one for him to win today.
Omega Pharma Quick Step, Eureka Green Edge, Tirolongo from Espana. Those are riders just ahead of Degenkolb. And this is back to our 7-man breakaway.
And right now this breakaway has to benefit from a little bit of indecision back behind. The peloton, after those attacks, now you see them looking back. If they ease up a little bit, the breakaway will get some more time. That's how breaks succeed, slow and steady.
It's getting a little more interesting here. Half a minute with 10K and a little activity off the front end of the field. And the green jersey of John Degenkolb at the very front, and look how much it is stretched out at the back, single file now.
Degenkolb does not want to be at the front of the field. It puts him in the wind, it makes him vulnerable. He's watching these attacks go.
Another Astana attack.
Yeah, his teammates, they have to haul themselves back up to the front through this peloton and help control this for him.
Now these guys are seeing that Argos Shimano has really wiped themselves out in setting the pace at the front of the field all day long, and now a chance to maybe ride across to the breakaway with fresh legs and steal the stage. 10K to go. Still half a minute to our 7 leaders. Omega Pharma Quick Step out front. Astana seconds. Looks like a Katusha rider third. 7 leaders, 9K. So without the sprinters' teams really lined up at the front of the field to control the race at this point, without a lot of organization and motivation, this allows a situation like this to unfold. with the breakaway seemingly close to being caught and riders attacking from the front of the field with a chance to take the stage.
There's no doubt that the end of this race is looking very tricky right now. A few guys trickling off the front of the field, trying to make it across that 32-second gap to the leaders, and the field a handful of seconds further back. They have another little rise that gets them up to the intermediate sprint at 5K, that's 3.1 miles to go, to kind of mess with the rhythm.
So these guys are just a few seconds ahead of the field. It's Daniel Moreno there at the back for Katusha. Andre Kasechkin. And Gert Stiegmans is the rider for Omega Pharma Quickstep.
Well, Stiegmans has been pretty much anonymous this race so far, but when he's going well and he's motivated, he has a furious finish. So this is actually a really good move by Stiegmans. In fact, his team director, Patrick Lefevre, kind of threw him under the bus and said, well, we just re-signed him for a couple of years and now he's not motivated anymore.
Looks pretty motivated right now. Field a few seconds behind. So we have those three riders that we just talked about ahead of this main field, but still the breakaway up the road. Hanging on. Juan Antonio Flecha from Team Sky, setting the pace, scared him in second.
There's Meyer in the third spot. These guys are putting everything into this 2K from the intermediate sprint.
Leo Viviani there in the green for Liquigas. They should somehow hang on. Watch for him in a sprint from this small group.
And you got to wonder how much he'll have left. Will we have his typical trademark speed after he's been pulling through in a break all day? Kasechkin there leading through, Stiegmans and Moreno. 30 seconds, 31 seconds back. So they're not making much headway. And though they should be fresher because they've been in the field all day, they're up against a 7-rider group in front of them.
And the field is just a few seconds behind them now, so they may not, in fact, get across to the breakaway riders. They may get caught before that.
It's really starting to look more and more to me like the breakaway succeeds. It's kind of been in play for a long time here, wondering if the field would get organized enough to bring them back. And it just doesn't quite look like it's going to happen at this point.
Now, Orica Green
Flecha attacking.
As Flecha does attack for the intermediate sprint, Gerdeman on his wheel. Flecha's going to go through first, get top points and time.
Flecha, he's going to keep going. If he has a gap, do not expect him to sit up. He is going to try and take this all the way to the line.
Half a dozen K left to go. I'm about to say Orica Green Edge does have the advantage in 2 riders in the breakaway with Cam Meyer and Simon Clark, so they're the only team that has more than one in the move, so perhaps the element of teamwork will come into play, but that's assuming that Flecha doesn't get away and stay away at this point, because he does continue to ride here. Hit by a car in the Tour de France a couple of years ago.
Oh, that was ugly. 30 miles an hour, hit by a car that was passing the breakaway. He took it, went down, took out Hogerland, who took out a barbed wire fence and got over 30 stitches in his legs. Maybe the fence took out Hogerland, but the fence post was broken off regardless.
So Flecha and Cummings come through the sprint together. Cummings in the red and black for BMC. And now the breakaway really coming apart here with different accelerations. Interesting that Flecha made that move so soon, well in advance of the intermediate sprint point. But now this is the very front of the stage here. Cummings, Flecha, then De Hent for Vacan Soleil. Gerdeman is up there. And guys starting to look around as we move back to the front of the field. Argos Shimano, as well as Orica Green Edge, Rabobank with riders at the front. As they come through the sprint banner. 5K left in the stage. Well, we have
Man, that looks a
4K to
lot
go
like
banner.
Tony Martin, who's going on the attack from the peloton.
Well, the 6 riders now left in the breakaway, kind of looking around at each other.
Yeah, they got to stay vigilant right now. If they play many games, they're going to get swept up. And Fletcher going again, but telegraphing it wasn't, I guess, a real attack. Here we go. So once again, Cummings now this time.
Moves all the way to the right-hand side of the road to launch his acceleration. Meyer matching it. Fletcher in third, then DeHent, Geerdeman, and Simon Clark.
You want to get the element of surprise when you go on these attacks. 43 seconds. Those guys are gone.
Wow, what an unusual stage this has turned out to be. Your typical flat transitional type of stage before a big weekend in the mountains, but not enough sprinters team had enough motivation or horsepower to control the race long enough to bring the breakaway back.
This is a very good opportunity for the Orica Green Edge duo. Simon Clark has a good kick, a good turn of speed. He's got a teammate, Cam Meyer, to try and shut things down for him. So they have a big advantage having 2 guys here.
Clark has already won a stage from a breakaway. That was stage 4 earlier in week 1. But now Cummings with a solo move with 3K to go to try and hang on.
He is definitely burning up the asphalt. Remember, he's the guy who went across to Fletcher, so he's shown that he's got some pretty good legs. And the group behind kind of falling apart a little bit. Fletcher's in the 2nd spot. It looks like Thomas DeHent, but it might be an Orica jersey in front of him. A little hard to tell those 2 apart from up high.
Now Fletcher trying to move over on the right-hand side. 3 other riders split off the back, but still trying to regain contact as the field comes through 3K banner. Now Cummings doesn't appear to be going anywhere. They are slowly starting to reel him back in.
These guys have about 105 miles in the rearview mirror at this point. It's a very tough day of racing.
All right, the final 2 kilometers, kind of downhill here. The final kilometer will be dead straight, slightly uphill, but really nothing to speak of. And this is the pace at the front of the field. That's Contador sitting 2nd wheel in the white jersey behind his teammate. Almost 70K per hour.
Over 40 miles an hour for them right there. But I have news for them. If that 42-second gap was correct, they missed the train.
So Cummings still hanging on out front. They haven't fully closed the gap yet. Stephen Cummings, who won a track silver medal at the Olympics in Athens back in 2004. With this late stage attack on the 13th day at the Vuelta.
And that's Simon Clark that's back there with Fletcher in the chase. 1K to go for Cummings. This could be massive for him if he can hold these guys off. But they are slowly clawing him back.
Haven't seen many late stage attacks from a breakaway so far at this year's Vuelta when it wasn't a GC battle. But we get one today. Cummings trying to hang on. Clark wanting some help from Fletcher behind him. But they may run out of room here. They may not have enough in order to bring Cummings back.
Cummings completely motivated. He knows if he could just hold these guys off a little bit longer, he can get a massive victory.
That's going to be it. Cummings is going to ride away with this because Fletcher and Clark were looking at each other, wanting help from one another. It never came, so Stephen Cummings, who attacked in the final few kilometers from the breakaway, is going to get the win for BMC.
Beautiful job by him. Their 2nd win of the race to go with Philippe Gilbert's. That's got to be a great day for that squad.
Clark and Fletcher. Then Cam Meyer, Linus Geerdeman, and Thomas DeHent coming across now. After just over 4 hours on the bike, Ian Stannard here in the white jersey for Team Sky.
You can see Degenkolb sitting 3rd, Swift in 2nd. So, not the day Argo Shimano wanted, but he's going for whatever points he can because he wants to fight for that points jersey all the way. So Degenkolb gets the bunch kick. but Rodriguez will still remain the overall leader of the points classification.
And the GC will remain unchanged as Stephen Cummings gets the win from the break here on stage 13 at the Vuelta a Espana. Englishman Stephen Cummings attacking from the breakaway in the final few kilometers and pulling away to his first ever Grand Tour stage win.
Great job by him. Biggest win in his career by far. He only has a small win in February at Algarve, way earlier this year.
So Cummings, a former track rider, gets his first Grand Tour stage win on the road today.
Congratulations, Stephen. Tell us, how was that 3 last kilometers?
Just full gas, very hard. Also, like, the whole day was hard, so yeah, always the wind in the head, and in the end I played it really well, and I had good legs. So
you planned that attack?
Well, for me to win, I have to win alone because there was fast people in the group, and yeah, I just tried to wait for a good moment.
And you were looking behind to Flecha and that. What did you think?
I'm gonna kill Flecha.
Why?
No, I'm just joking. No, it's very strong, Flecha, so all I could do in that situation was go 100%, so that was it.
Maybe the beautiful one victory for you in your career?
Yeah, my best victory for sure, for sure. It's been a very difficult year, so I'm very happy.
For who is this victory?
Just my team, for always believing in me and supporting me, because it's been such a difficult year.
Congratulations.
Live on Universal Sports, this is stage number 14 as we begin our final week of racing at the season's final Grand Tour. Joaquim Rodriguez with a 13-second lead on fellow Spaniard Alberto Contador. Chris Froome, the only other rider within 1 minute, with Alejandro Valverde just beyond 1 minute. A sink rounding out the top 5, and Andrew Talansky, the highest placed American, going into what will be one of the most difficult mountain days of the entire race.
No doubt the guys have had this one on their mind. 149.2 kilometers, that's about 93 miles. But look at this profile, up and down all day with the emphasis on the up. 11,600 feet of climbing officially as per the race organization. The final climb, 9.5K, just under 6 miles. It's up to almost 13%, and it climbs 2,500 feet to get up to almost 5,000 feet at the top. It will be a day to mix up the GC.
This is live on stage 14 of the Vuelta a Espana, presented by GoPro. 50 kilometers left to go. A large breakaway is 2.5 minutes ahead of the main field. That breakaway now starting to come apart somewhat. 16 riders altogether. It's the largest breakaway we've had so far in the first 2 weeks of the season's final Grand Tour. And what a day this figures to be. This is the first of 3 consecutive summit finishes over this third weekend of racing that could go a long way towards deciding the ultimate podium at the end of the race.
This is the first of the 3 mountain days that the general classification men been thinking about for a while. This is that lead group, however, that's been fracturing just a little bit under the pressure of some attacks here with 50 kilometers remaining.
They've gone over 3 climbs. They still have the 2 most difficult still to come. As far as the breakaway riders, the highest placed man on the GC is Serge Pauwels, a Belgian from Omega Pharma Quickstep, but he's over 12 minutes behind Joaquim Rodriguez, who is our overall leader for the 10th consecutive day here at the Vuelta. So not a lot of GC concern among the riders in the move today.
Yeah, this breakaway group of 16 is really all about stage hunters, guys trying to get a stage win, maybe also get into the lead of the mountains classification. But back in the peloton, it has been all down to the work of Alberto Contador's Saxo Bank Tinkoff team on the front. Rodriguez, the race leader, he said before the stage, he doesn't mind letting a break get up the road, get the time bonuses. This is the type of finish that favors Contador over Rodriguez.
Joaquim Rodriguez now leading in the general classification by 13 seconds on Contador, 51 seconds on Chris Froome, with Alejandro Valverde 120 off the pace. So Joaquin Rodriguez not in a position to have to chase time bonuses. He can ride defensively against the other top riders on the general classification.
And that's going to be important today. That was Daniele Benatti just getting popped out of the back of the group here. Today is not going to be a day for him. Neither are the next couple of days with all the climbing. But Rodriguez, he has really shown his strength in the short, punchy climbs, and that's the reason he's still leading this race overall. Now the next 3 days, he needs to be in defense mode, and he needs to limit his losses to Contador primarily, but he also has to keep his eye on Froome and Valverde.
So 49 kilometers left to go. 19K of that will be a lot of Cat 1 climbing at the end of the stage. We could see a shakeup on the general classification. Cat 1's left to go as we are back up with our leaders, whose lead has now gone up to over 3 minutes, with again just under 50 kilometers left to go. Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogulski, and it's not just about today. This is about the next 3 days of high mountains in northern Spain. They are in the Asturias region, and the storyline leading up to this pivotal weekend has been, can Rodriguez, who's been in the lead more than anybody else at this race, now his 10th day in the red jersey, can he excel as much in the high mountains as he has on the shorter, steeper uphill finishes, which are always his specialty? These not so much. These favor guys more like Contador and Froome, so can Rodriguez also hold his own here and maintain the lead?
And certainly you can see that Contador's team, Saxo Bank, is all over the front of this peloton because they want to put Rodriguez in as much trouble as possible all day long. They do not want this stage to meander along and let that break go because there's no one dangerous for the general classification in it, and then have Rodriguez fresh at the bottom of the climb. They want to keep it steadily hard all day, hurt him along the way, and hope that he shows that vulnerability on the final ascent that he sometimes does.
This is the largest breakaway we've had so far in this year's Vuelta, and this is the largest lead they've had all day, just over 3 minutes. It's been a tight leash being tugged on by the team of Alberto Contador. Saxo Bank in the yellow, black, and blue at the front. Contador is wearing a white jersey here for the combined classification. And Contador said coming into this Vuelta, which is his first Grand Tour since coming off the suspension, that his form was going to be at its best in the third week. It was going to take a while to find his legs. So now that we are entering the third week, his preferred territory, the terrain he loves the most, will this indeed be the time for him to make a decisive move to the top of the leaderboard?
Well, and there's no doubt that Contador so far has not been as sterling as in his previous years in Grand Tours. He's put in attacks, but he has not been able to get away and take a stage win. He's been close, but he hasn't been able to finish it off. The other guys have seen that, but they've also seen him getting better along the way.
And now, is he finally coming around after not racing for so long? If you think about it, we haven't seen him on a true high alpine mountain stage at a Grand Tour since the Mount Etna stage, going back to the Giro in 2011, when he attacked at the base of the climb and then rode away with the Giro for all intents and purposes on that day. That's his trademark type of move. So will we see that for the first time in the last couple of years here today from Contador?
Yeah, and that Giro was so tough on him last year that when he went on to the Tour de France, he just didn't have it at the end. You know, those were the days where he was in defense mode at last year's Tour after being so good at the Giro. Well, the Giro was incredibly difficult last year, and a lot of guys are saying that this Vuelta, though it's not quite as crazy, it's still pretty significant. 10 uphill finishes, 7 of them considered mountain summit finishes. It's a very tough race.
Going to be a very interesting final 45K, considering we have such a large breakaway that still has almost 3 minutes. We have the ambitions of the top GC riders on 2 significant Category 1 climbs. So we have the potential for one of those stages where when you get down to it, you got riders all over the road. Some trying to hang on, some getting past. And you have one of those crazy finishes where you have guys scattered all over the mountains. And those final 2 climbs, each just under 10K apiece.
Yeah, the general classification men have to keep a close eye on each other, especially on the final climb where probably the biggest damage will be done, because there are likely to be people scattered all over the place, like you're saying, some guys possibly still hanging on from this breakaway. And so if you're chasing somebody up the road, you got to make sure that you are chasing the right guy when you're cross-eyed.
So the big name to watch today will be Contador. He has his team on the fronts of the field right now. But how about Chris Froome? One of the favorites coming in, considering his performances at the Tour de France, the London Olympic Games, the terrific form he's had all season long. He's shown some signs of weakness, but like Contador, he's getting into the high mountains that also favor him today.
Indeed, I actually spoke with Bobby Julich yesterday. He's Chris Froome's trainer on Team Sky. And the thing about Chris is that for the last 2 seasons, Bobby said he's been used to being able to rip everybody's legs off, and where basically he's riding and he quotes, his saying was he couldn't even feel the chain. Well, now he can feel the chain because he can feel the resistance on these short, sharp climbs. He's tired from the Olympics following the Tour, so he's lost his upper end. But the real question is, does he have enough left to still excel in these long climbs?
And we'll find out. 2 Category 1 climbs coming up. The final 40 kilometers, each just under 10K long, and some very steep slopes awaiting the riders on a sunny Saturday in northern Spain. When we come back to our leaders, 40K left to go in the stage. That's just about 7K away from the start of the 4th climb of this Saturday at the 67th Vuelta, the first of back-to-back Cat 1s at the end of the stage. 16-man breakaway, largest we've seen at this year's race, and their gap just a few moments ago got up over 3 minutes. Now it's back down under 3, with Saxo Bank still the team at the front of the main field, followed by Katusha. Now today is the shortest stage of the race. That's not a time trial or the final day, which is always a ceremonial type of a stage into the Spanish capital of Madrid. Only 149 kilometers long, but you throw 5 climbs on the menu and it probably feels a lot longer than just 149K.
Considerably. That overhead gave us a nice shot of all 9 of the Saxo Bank riders sitting on the front of the peloton in pursuit of this 16-rider group. It's a big group, and there's some notable riders in it, but as we said earlier, the highest guy is Serge Pauwels, the Belgian on Omega Pharma Quick-Step, at 12:15 down in the overall. Ahmet Charuka in the orange jersey, somewhere up there, is riding for Euskaltel. He's 12:21 down, and then it jumps up to 16 and 25. So no chance for these guys to upset the general classification at all. Really just a shot at a stage win. And certainly the mountains classification is up for grab, and Simon Clark has picked up top honors at a couple of the mountain sprints, and now he leads the mountain classification by 2 points over Valverde.
Already has a stage win from a breakaway that he survived on stage number 4, winning just ahead of Tony Martin. Now the weather in this second week of the Vuelta has really been spectacular. Temperatures in the 70s and 80s, largely sunny skies after sweltering weather in the first week in northeastern Spain, routinely above 100 degrees. I don't know if we've seen a drop of rain for the most part, maybe a light sprinkle here or there, but it has been sunny 99% of the time so far in the first 2 weeks now of the Vuelta a Espana.
Typically fairly hot as well. As you can see, one of our Radio Shack riders in the break there, having a little bit of a natural on the downhill. You got to do it when you got to do it. One of the guys in this break in a red jersey would be David Moncoutier. He's a Cofidis rider. He's won the mountains classification here the last 4 years in a row. And we've been wondering if he would be going for that again this year. But before the stage, he said he wanted to get a stage win more than the mountains jersey. He says his legs just don't feel as good as they have in years past.
Well, for anybody that wants the mountains jersey, these next 3 stages, starting with today's stage 14, this is the place to do it. Heading east today into the Asturias mountain range. Palas de Rey was the start town earlier today, hosting a Vuelta departure for the first time in its history, and then finishing on the climb of the Puerto de Ancares. Also a first time Vuelta stage finish for the climb that they are headed to at the end of today's stage 14.
These are the days that the domestiques on a team really earn their keep. In fact, the director for Saxo Bank, Bradley McGee, was talking about how they actually have some of their domestiques every day when it's not critical, sit up late in the race and finish off the back of the peloton when the speed really ramps up to a frenetic pace at the end, just so they can save some more to ride on the front later on. It's a great tactic, and a professional rider has to put their pride and their ego aside and when they want to ride in off the back of the peloton and all those people are there.
Now today's the first stage where we have really seen Saxo Bank come to the front of the field and do the type of pacemaking that we're seeing today, but that just fits into the narrative of the way the race has unfolded to this point, because Contador has to attack today. These 3 days in the mountains, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, before the next rest day on Tuesday, are absolutely critical for the general classification. Contador has to attack, Froome has to attack, Joaquin Rodriguez, who is the overall leader, can sit back and ride a little more defensively. There's no more time trialing to be done, so he doesn't really have to go up the road and hope for time bonuses. He can mark the wheels of his biggest rivals for the most part.
Yeah, Rodriguez just has to avoid having a bad day. So we were just seeing Blel Kadri, the AG2R rider, back at his team car, and he's one of the guys in that breakaway, grabbing bottles and so on, and then bringing them up to his teammate up in the group a little further, Ben Gastower. Much easier to do that from the break than from the peloton.
So just about 3K away from the start of the first Category 1 climb of the day, and our large 16-man breakaway still holding on to a lead of just around 3 minutes on the main field. At the back of our leading group, with 34K left to go on this 14th day of racing at the season's final Grand Tour. Sunny day, mild temperatures, and a lead of 2:40 on the field.
Justo ahí. Perfecto. Perfecto. Cuando está todo quemado.
The red line shows us that the riders are coming up on the start of the final 2 climbs of the day, and what do you know, they're the 2 most difficult.
It's definitely showtime for these guys. They've been riding on the front all day here for Saxo Bank, and now their leader is going to have to make some stuff happen. Alberto Contador is going to have to start to get back some of that time to Joaquin Rodriguez. He's got just a 13-second deficit, so they just need to keep Rodriguez under pressure and see if he cracks. He did not crack in the Giro d'Italia earlier this year. He ended up second, but he lost it because of the final day time trial, not because he cracked on a summit finish.
If you want to be specific, this first Category 1 climb will start with 33.3 kilometers left to go, and summit with 23.6 remaining. It's 9.7K long, averaging just under 7%, with a maximum of 10% coming right at the very beginning of the climb. Coming up on 3 hours in on what once again is still a very short stage by comparison over the 3 weeks of racing here at the Vuelta. But 5 climbs on the day. They've done a Cat 3, a 2, another 3, now about to do back-to-back Category 1 climbs here in the final 30K. So our 16-man breakaway starting the climb, and again, this is where it will be at its steepest, 10% early. How much action will you expect from the breakaway and the field on this first of the 2 Cat 1s?
I think we're going to start to see a little bit of weeding out from the breakaway. I don't think the field is going to be super animated at the front. I think most of the action from the peloton is going to be the attrition of guys getting spit out the back on this climb. I'd be surprised if anybody puts in any really big efforts on the climb, unless they're guys that are further down on the general classification and they think that they have a shot to kind of take the GC guys by a little bit of surprise and get a gap before the final climb.
So the toughest climb of the day so far, but an even tougher one coming up at the end of the stage. Our leaders on the penultimate climb of the day. Narrow, twisting, and longer than many of the climbs they have seen so far in this year's Vuelta. Remember, a lot of the summit finishes in the first 2 weeks were pretty short, much steeper than we are going to see today, but these are your more traditional Grand Tour, sustained, grinding, higher alpine climbs. Nothing like a cool mountain stream on a warm Saturday. The Rio Navia, following the path of the riders today through the Asturias region, where they will be for the next 3 days prior to the rest day on Tuesday. And now we're back to the front of the field, led by Saxo Bank.
Not a super hot day for the guys, but I have seen in the Coors Classic when I was racing that back in the 80s on a big tailwind climb, 100-degree day, a European guy got off his bike and climbed down and got in the stream.
Yeah, why not? Take an inner tube, cool off for a little bit. Contador, looks like he means business, riding with his team at the front. Smiling earlier, but this is the point of the race where the smiles disappear and guys really drill down into that focus, that intensity, because moves start to happen.
It's actually very much a lot of intensity. If you look at these guys, they just burned off a couple of their men, and they got to make sure that they keep some guys to get Alberto into that final climb and not let him be isolated early on. They want to keep somebody to keep that tempo up really high before he puts out the attack. Blel Kadri getting his ticket punched off the back of the group. That's why he was back at the car earlier, getting supplies for his teammate who is in that breakaway as well, Ben Gastower.
Well, 4 teams have at least 2 riders in that breakaway. So again, it's a unique move by comparison from what we've seen so far, in that it's so large and that so many teams have multiple riders in the signature break of the day.
There's a lot of scrambling going on in this peloton. Some guys going backwards, other guys trying to hang on and go around gaps before they open up. But there are going to be some gaps here, and some people are going to start to lose contact.
Now Kadri not putting up much of a fight. So we should be down 15 now in the front group. And the motorcycle says, well, it's about all we can do with Blel Kadri, so let's move on back to the rest of the boys.
Yeah, now we see if Serge Powell gets dropped. He's been the other guy who's been on the rivet on these climbs in the past when there's an acceleration in the group.
Again, this group, despite its size, really has not gotten much time today. Just over 3 minutes, the largest margin they've ever had over the field. Now down under 2.
Simon Clark now at the back. He's the man temporarily leading the mountains classification. But the peloton, they're going to get a lot of time looking at the backs of Saxo Bank as they look up and just see Contador's teammates keeping the pressure on.
Contador again is in a white jersey for the combined classification, riding 3rd from the front at the head of the peloton right now. Other guys dropping off the pace from the field on the lower slopes of the climb.
There's going to be a lot of this for the next couple days. Tomorrow really not that tough a day until the end, much less significant than today. And then stage 16, we might see some of the biggest gaps of the whole race on stage 16.
Okay, so they've started the first of the 2 Category 1 climbs. Still over 30K left to go in the stage, and the lead for the breakaway just under 2 minutes. Now getting dropped from the breakaway group.
Milan has had good form, but he is not a man for the big mountains. He's been setting up Gilbert for a stage win earlier this race into Madrid, or into Barcelona. That was stage number 9. And he's really looking forward to the World Championships in the Netherlands on a course that suits his style quite well.
He is a former world champion, so he'll be looking for his 2nd rainbow jersey coming up in just a few weeks. Gap now down to just 90 seconds. from the breakaway to the field.
This Shimano car is the car for neutral support. So they support anybody in the move that has a problem.
No team has offered any support to Saxo Bank. They've been at the front throughout the stage, followed by Katusha and then Sky. And just behind Sky, you have the polka dot jersey of Alejandro Valverde, wearing the Mountains jersey once again today. And Valverde, although he's worn the red jersey of overall race leader, he says at this point he's just thinking about the podium. Even though we have counted him in as one of the top 4, he's now over a minute back. And do you really believe that he could be a player for the red jersey, or do you buy into what he says, that he's going to just be satisfied if he can somehow get on the podium and that's it?
I kind of believe what he says. I think that he kind of came into this race not wanting to be the leader. He wanted Kobo to be the leader, and he just by default found himself in a position where he had good legs on the opening week with the short uphill finishes. Interestingly, though, the trainer for Chris Froome, Bobby Julich, told me yesterday he thinks the most dangerous guy may still be Valverde because he's really smart tactically, and he may take advantage of a situation and exploit the battle between the other guys. So, you know, there's always a lot to be thinking about. It's not just strength, but it's how your team is functioning and what you can figure out.
Rudy Millard of Cofidis, the latest rider to come off the back of the breakaway. So slowly but surely we're starting to see guys lose contact here at the front of the race as the climb continues. Now down to 28K left to go in the stage, and that gives them just under 5K of climbing remaining to the summit of this Cat 1. 25K to go in the stage. That is a kilometer and a half of climbing for the front group to the top of this Cat 1 climb. Balan and Millard picked up by the field as they slide backwards. Now Chris Froome, Joaquin Rodriguez, Alejandro Valverde, all right there alongside Alberto Contador. Things really getting cozy now at the front. And oh, Contador now has dropped back with a wheel issue.
He's got a teammate there immediately. And it looks like the teammate did give him a front wheel, so the teammate will wait for the mechanic. And now Alberto has to ride through everybody. His team will ease up a little bit on the front, but this is still not a great position for a guy to be in.
Now we saw those other riders coming to the front, and there were still some Saxo Bank riders up there, and that explains the easing of the tempo. And now here is Contador, the teammate dropping back as they are still on this Cat 1 climb, and he's not too far off the back of the field here, so it looks like he'll have to use a little energy to get on, but it's not going to be too far of a charge for him to get back up in the group.
Well, when you've got good legs, something like this doesn't necessarily have to be catastrophic. It's Sergio Paulino there picking him up. And nice little move there by Rodriguez, getting pushed up the hill, or the flat section there, and taking a nature break at the same time.
And it works in Contador's favor.
Well, that's
about as slow as they're going to be going.
Yeah, and that's a perfect time if you got to go, and the field is kind of sitting up because Contador is coming back. That's the time to get that relief.
It also emphasizes why you have teammates around you, not just to help set the pace and make it hard for your rivals, but also, hey, if something happens, you need to have a teammate right there to assist you.
Yeah, it's that wheel change was so much quicker by having a teammate give him a wheel, because his team car is back there buried behind the commissar and all these other vehicles. Yeah, he's close to the front of the caravan, but he's not the first car, and so your teammate can get it done a lot quicker.
Remember a few years ago at this very same Vuelta, Cadel Evans had that wheel issue and had to wait for a car on a critical mountain day, and it cost him a chance at the Vuelta that year.
Oh yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. In fact, his teammate Jürgen Vandenbroek decided not to wait for him and help him out. Needless to say, they were not on the same team the next year.
Contador working his way up the left-hand side of the road now. But it was just that one moment on one day, and Cadel Evans lost what was going to be a good chance to win his first ever Grand Tour at the time. It was before he had won the Tour.
And basically, Cadel lost, I think it was close to a minute that day, and it was really frustrating for him.
This is Simon Clark, who was attacked from the front group over the top of the climb, so it looks like he's going to get maximum King of the Mountains points for another climb here. Third consecutive one on this stage number 14 as he consolidates his position now as the new leader in the King of the Mountains competition.
See Amets Choruka there at the back in the orange jersey of Euskaltel, trying to get that soigneur from another team to give him a bottle, but Clark here making a big effort, getting some more points for the Mountains classification. He's got to be pretty pleased with himself.
Now Alberto Contador back near the front of the field, behind his teammates, sitting third wheel. So the order has been restored. Joaquim Rodriguez in the red jersey right behind Contador. Alejandro Valverde a few spots back. Haysink is up there in the orange and blue for Rabobank, protecting his top 5 position on the GC. And picking up another rider from the early breakaway.
And Paterski now, one less up the road, hanging out in between the break and the peloton, and he's going to keep doing that all day long to the finish.
So the breakaway has hit the summit of the climb, now on the descent. The field, with all of the GC riders still going up towards the summit. And now for this breakaway, 22.5 kilometers left to go in the stage. They have an intermediate sprint coming up at 12.2K left, and then the final climb starting with 9.5K remaining. So the GC riders 137 back as they come over the top. So 4 climbs down, 1 to go. But that final ascent, another Category 1 up to the summit finish on stage 14. Going to get a look at a rather unique area of Spain for the summit finish on stage 14.
And the Yukihiro Doi fans are out. The Chinese national road champion, Japanese. And they're sporting the flag, which is very nice to see. Typically, we have not seen a whole lot of Chinese and Japanese riders in the professional peloton, but they continue to become a little bit more regular in the peloton.
Some more races in the Far East added to the calendar every year as the sport continues to expand on its global reach. We're on DDA here of Radio Shack Nissan in the breakaway of 16 riders, but
no longer
dropping back, as many have now, through these series of climbs.
And this has really just been a race of attrition to this point for both the breakaway and the peloton. In that last climb, we saw riders getting shed out of the break and a bunch of guys being spit out the back of the peloton. The final climb will have some attrition, and then we'll have some big attacks.
Now 140 back to the field. This looks like Moncoutier here is just off the back of our front group. Again, that original breakaway that had 16 riders early on has come apart and lost several on these last few climbs. Moncoutier, the most recent victim here, but he's still trying to catch back on as opposed to the others who have gone backwards and been scooped up by the peloton.
Kind of weird because he was third over the top of the climb. It went Clark, Powles, and Moncoutier. So maybe he just is a little bit uncomfortable on the descent.
So as we often see on these multi-climb stages in the high mountains at a Grand Tour, it's going to come down to the final climb. The GC riders staying very close to one another at the front of the field, riding tempo and just biding their time, waiting until that final climb to really launch any decisive moves.
They have to do that typically because the more teammates the leaders have around them, the more they can use those resources. They can deploy those teammates to chase down breakaways that are dangerous. And so basically, it all builds to this crescendo on the final topographical moment of the race, where there are going to be few teammates of all the leaders left to help them out.
Second intermediate sprint of the day coming up with just over 12 kilometers left to go. And then the final climb starts with 9.5K remaining. So we are approaching the critical moments of stage 14. Penultimate weekend of the race. Second to last Saturday. First day of September. And Joaquim Rodriguez, his 10th day in the red jersey of overall race leader. Can he possibly take it all the way to Madrid?
It's already been a very successful Vuelta for him with 2 wins and holding the jersey for 10 days. And ouch!
AG2R rider going down, and that was Ben Gastauer from the breakaway.
Ooh.
Right in front of the motorcycle, too.
There are a lot of skills that are in play back there in the caravan. The moto drivers, the cars. They just have to be so aware of what's going on with the riders at all times.
And we also see motorcycles crash. We see cars run into riders and go off the road. So it's a very delicate dance that everybody does on these tight roads. The guys on the bikes, on the motorcycles, and the cars. It's not easy.
The worst crash I saw from a car was in that same Coors Classic back in '88, when the car was in front of the peloton on the descent and we were catching them, and they actually slid off the road sideways and rolled down into the ditch. It was the Campy car, the lead support vehicle. Driver was okay. Bikes and car, total loss.
Some good stories today. Teammates going into creeks, cars going off the road and rolling.
That was actually horrifying for all of us watching it, as you could hear the tires squealing more and more and howling around each corner as the peloton was increasing its speed, and then we saw the car go off the road.
It's a dangerous sport that seems to be underscored every year, especially at the Grand Tours. So 16K remaining for what's left of the day's signature breakaway. Still holding on to this lead of a minute and a half. It really hasn't come down much in the last several kilometers. We are 4K away from the intermediate sprints and just about half a dozen K or so from the start of the final climb.
Chiruka lead.
More riders losing contact with the field. That has been really reduced in numbers because of the succession of climbs today. On stage number 14, they've gone over 4 to this point. They still have 1 Cat 1 remaining. And not too far away from starting that now. It kicks in with 9.5K left to go in the stage. And still single file at the front of what is left of the peloton, led by Saxo Bank.
Losada here, continuing to lead off. Not a big gap for him. This is a man who has no professional wins in his career, but he did pick up a 3rd place earlier this year at stage 15 of the Giro d'Italia from a breakaway.
14K left to go to the finish for Losada. And this isn't even the climb, but it's one of those unrated little bumps in the road just ahead of the intermediate sprint at 12.2K left.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, it's pretty much uphill from here all the way to that intermediate sprint. And then they have a little bit of a dip and the final climb. The final climb is a tough one, there's no doubt. Almost 13% max, climbs 2,500 feet in just under 6 miles. There's a little bit of a downhill section in the middle though, so some guys will get a little reprieve there.
What's going to be interesting is on that final climb, the maximum of just about 13% comes with 2K to go to the summit finish. So we should definitely expect to see something happening at that point, if not before then, as they start to shape the general classification. Now 3.5 hours in and waiting for these decisive moments to come in the mountains of northern Spain.
Well, you certainly would expect some action there at that 13% pitch, a couple K out from the end. And then right at the end, it's also just over 10% up to the line. So it is definitely going to be one where guys may leave it fairly late.
Saxo Bank status quo at the front. Alberto Contador has more often than not had at least two teammates in front of him. And the pace at the front causes attrition at the back. For some guys who are not climbing specialists, this is just one hard day. Not a long day. Again, we just saw they're 3.5 hours in, but they've gone over 2 Cat 3 climbs, 1 Cat 2, already 1 Category 1, and they're coming up on yet another Category 1 climb.
And I think it's worth noting that even though this is not a long day for cycling, it just illustrates how tough these guys have to be. They're 3.5 hours into a race, and it's not a long day.
Joaquim Rodriguez in the red jersey. A few spots behind in the white framed glasses of Team Sky. That is Chris Froome.
Bobby Julich was telling me yesterday more about Froome's situation and saying on the really steep pitch a couple of days ago that Rodriguez won, the plan for Froome was not even to try and follow the acceleration because he doesn't do well on those steep pitches. With a K to go, Froome was back in about 15th, but he crossed the line in 5th by riding within himself. And so these long climbs, they're more in his wheelhouse. And we'll just see how much he has left if he can get something done here.
It's the discipline it takes by riders in a Grand Tour who are fighting for the general classification. As Ben Gastower, who crashed a little while ago in the breakaway, is now picked up by the field. Because when you see one of your big rivals attacking on a climb and riding up the road, it's hard not to follow. You don't want to lose time. And in that instinctual moment, the knee-jerk reaction is to try and follow. But if you do that, sometimes it's not the best case long-term for your hopes.
Yeah, and the Sky team has a really interesting program where they have different riders that are being basically guided by different trainers. Bobby Julich has 6 or 7 guys, and Julich wasn't at the first week of the Vuelta, and he was telling me yesterday that really, Froome was riding the first week of the Grand Tour like it was the last week. He was too aggressive. We saw him leading out Ben Swift, spending too much time in the wind, being too excitable. Bobby's now trying to hold him back a little bit and make his efforts count.
Alberto Losado winning a furious sprint here with just over 12K left to go to the finish. Only in Spain do they put intermediate sprints in places like this.
Top of a climb.
Well, I've done 4 climbs already, and this is preceding the final big climb on an uphill section of its own.
Well, only in Spain do they do course profiles like this. The maps are just insanely bizarre. How they remove the categorized climbs from the profile and just have a blank there.
Now the major players here at the front. Contador, Rodriguez, Froome, Valverde, Haysink. It's Rabobank team still with 3 riders in the top 10 on the general classification, and Haysink is in the top 5, saying that he hopes to be on the podium at the end of this race. So he's still harboring ambitions of moving up even further.
Well, it's going to take a couple guys to crack because he's sitting just about 3 minutes down right now, and he's going to have to get around 2 guys that are significantly in front of him. Looks like Simon Clark saying goodbye, but you know what? Good job by him today. He got maximum points on that last mountain sprint as well. Now he leads Valverde by 12 points in the mountains classification. There are only 10 points on offer for the win today at the finish line.
Clark has a stage win and now the King of the Mountains jersey in a very productive 2-week stretch at the Vuelta.
Pretty great for a guy who was searching for his first win early on in this Grand Tour and got it in stage number 4.
So the field about to hit that intermediate sprint banner just ahead of the final climb. The gap is going back out to Alberto Losada. we went through there as the leader on the stage. 154 back for all of the GC riders. So now we're down to the final climb. It will start with 9.5K left to go on the day. Final 10K of a very pivotal stage 14 in the big mountains of northern Spain. Headed up to a summit finish, one of 7 at this year's race, one of 13 mountain stages overall, and the first of 3 consecutive summit finishes just prior to the second rest day. These next 3 days will go a long way towards determining the winner of the 67th Vuelta a Espana. Alberto Losado, the Katusha rider from the early breakaway of 16 riders, is out front by himself. That breakaway has come apart over the series of climbs that the riders have already navigated today. 4 in the rearview mirror and the final one coming up. Here is Losada, the 30-year-old from Barcelona. Part of this Katusha team that features the overall leader Joaquim Rodriguez, but that hasn't had to do any work today because Rodriguez's big competitor, Alberto Contador, has put his Saxo Bank team on the front of the field. They've set the tempo and continue to ride at the head of the peloton. And now it's all going to come down to the final climb, starting with 9.5K to go. They'll average 8% with a max of 13. Again, Contador trailing Rodriguez by 13 seconds in the general classification. Froome 51 seconds back. Alejandro Valverde sits 4th at 1:20 off the pace. And Robert Haysink almost 3 minutes down in 5th place on the general classification here on stage 14. Time bonuses of 12, 8, and 4 seconds as well for the first 3 at the line. So again, those could certainly be in play to help frame the general classification once again the way they have throughout the first 2 weeks. So what are you thinking, Gogo? As we come down to this final climb, it's all together as we anticipated. We have just one rider breakaway, Alberto Losado, but it doesn't look like he has much chance of surviving. Contador figures to attack. Seems like the big question will be, can Rodriguez hang with him? How is Froome feeling? Has the fatigue built up or has he recovered? And then Valverde, maybe the wild card.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's just we haven't seen these guys really battle it out on the longer climbs yet. And they're so different from the short, steep climbs. The short, steep climbs, they favor Rodriguez. He's been the dominant player. They typically are pretty good for Contador. He's also been there. And Valverde's been there most of the time. Now we shift into these long climbs. This takes a different type of sustained effort, but not an explosive effort.
So the terrain tips more into the favor of Contador and Froome, more away from Rodriguez here these next 3 days.
Indeed. Indeed it does. And Froome, he has not looked super sharp. His trainer, Julik, told me he's not looking super sharp either. This is Moncoutier here, and it looks like he is out the back of the peloton. So Froome is the huge wild card for me. Will he still have something left after this big season?
So they are starting this final climb inside the final 10K, 144 to the front, and the summit finish awaits at the top. Everyone on the final climb of stage 14, a category 1. Saxo Bank leading the way at the front of the field. Our lone leader out front on the stage is Alberto Losado of Katusha. Saxo Bank has been at the front of this main field throughout the day, setting a very sprightly tempo here, and now trying to set up Alberto Contador for perhaps an attack later on that could potentially move him into the race lead by the end of the day if things work out.
And this is how you see cycling is such a team sport. Contador's lieutenants all putting in these massive turns on the front, only to blow themselves up and the field in the process and try and set up Contador to attack his chief rivals.
This is some of the residue at the back because of that pace at the front. This climb, 9.5K long, averaging 8%, maximum of almost 13% will come with just 2 kilometers left to go. So things are going to get very critical right at the end of the stage in terms of attacks and launch pads for a very decisive move at the end of the stage.
And more men getting picked up that had been in the earlier 16-man move. This is Robert Hayes-Sink here, and this is not looking very good for his chances for a podium that he was talking about.
Sitting 5th on the GC at the start of the day, hoping to go forward, but it looks like he may be going backwards on the GC. Did
not expect to see him suffering like this early on this final climb. 7 kilometers to go for Losada.
It highlights how things can change on just one day. Hayes-Sink said he was feeling so good in the mountains the first 2 weeks, and now here he is all of a sudden having a bad day at the worst possible time.
And it's also the other factor we have to keep in mind is this is a big climb. It's a long climb to the finish. It's not a short, sharp climb, which is what they've been dealing with so far. Look at how small that front group was. Several Saxo Bank riders there and not many left. More guys getting sucked up from the early breakaway, so there are not many left besides Losada out front. He may be the last man standing in front of this group being led by Saxo Bank.
It is a very small group that is now just over a minute back of our race leader, Alberto Losada. Alberto Contador, Joaquim Rodriguez, Alejandro Valverde, and Chris Froome are all here. The top 4 on the GC, separated by a minute 20 seconds. They're hitting the 7K banner, just over a minute back of our stage leader. Javier Moreno was the rider from Movistar that was losing contact there. These guys are scattered all over the slopes of this final Cat 1 climb. Most are going backwards. This is Igor Anton, number 71 for Euskaltel. He was in the conversation for the GC hopefuls when this race started, building his entire season around the Vuelta, but once again, a disappointing result.
And look at the man on the front, Rafał Majka, the Polish rider who was told to sit up yesterday by his director, Brad McGee, for Saxo Bank to save it for today, and he's got it today.
So the lead now to Losada is under a minute with just over half a dozen K left to go.
Anton definitely looks like he's in trouble at the back there. He comes in 11th spot in the general classification. Contador out of the saddle, the 3rd rider back. Right in front of him is other teammate Danny Navarro, sitting in the 2nd spot.
So Contador has a few teammates, so does Rodriguez, and so does Chris Froome. So nobody isolated at this point, still with over 6K left to go. And no big surges from the GC riders. Again, the steepest part of the climb coming up with 2K to go when it hits almost 13%. Alberto Losada from an early 16-man breakaway, the largest of this year's Vuelta, trying to hang on, but has less than a minute left to go now.
He's definitely struggling mightily at this point, trying to hold on. This would be massive for this guy. He's never won a race in his professional career, but the chase is coming fast.
Most guys going backwards, others trying to hang on. Losada trying to hang on at the very front here, but his margin is certainly dwindling with exactly half a dozen kilometers remaining.
It wasn't long ago that he had almost a minute 47, and now look at him plummeting that gap. Talansky there hanging on toward the back of that group for Garmin Sharp.
He's number 91, trying to protect the top 10 on the general classification, sitting in 8th as the day started. Valverde pulling out there to get a look at everybody else in the blue and white polka dot jersey. The slow burn up the final climb of 5 on the day, waiting for the GC battle to really explode.
Majka now, number 203. He's done his big turn on the front for Contador, and now he's trying to get a little bit recovered and see if he can haul himself back to the front to help set some more tempo. Danny Navarro has now taken up the pacemaking on the front. So it looks like like we're down to in the neighborhood of 20, 25 guys in this group of contenders.
The top GC riders are all here. The slope is 8% on the final of 5 climbs on this stage 14. This is our lone leader, Alberto Losada of Katusha. Under 6K left to go to the summit finish.
He's going to get a little bit of a break here with just about 5K to go. He gets a little bit of a downhill, and then it kicks back up to the steepest part of the entire climb.
Earlier today, it was a 16-man breakaway, but they never had much road to work with as Saxo Bank kept them on a short leash all day long. The lead really only got over 3 minutes in terms of its largest margin, and it was kept very much within reason. And now down to just one rider from that 16, who's well inside of a minute ahead of all of the GC hopefuls here coming up on the final 5K. 2 Cat 3s, 1 Cat 2, and 1 Category 1 preceding this final Category 1 climb on the first of 3 consecutive days of summit finishes here at the Vuelta.
A lot of guys scrambling right here. 171, Maxime Montfort, 6th overall in this race last year, trying to salvage something right now, but struggling a little bit.
You have guys who are trying to protect placings in the general classification, other competitions, so it's not just about the GC for other riders, it's about trying to protect wherever they sit at this particular point on the race, and it is not easy because Saxo Bank continues to set the heavy tempo at the front.
Just hammering away here on the front, slowly whittling things down. You can see though that Rodriguez has teammates in this group. Froome has teammates as well.
You go as long as you can.
That's it.
You blow and you pull off. It's a simple formula.
It's simply painful.
Contador in the white, pulling out. Just ahead of him in the blue and white, Valverde. In the red jersey, it's Joaquin Rodriguez. That's Lawrence Tandam, number 168. He's one of those guys in the top 10 on the general classification. Sitting 9th as the day started at 5:18 back.
Tandam is a guy who typically is a super domestique, but he's found himself in the top 10 in the overall. And he said he was kind of enjoying it, but he was feeling pretty tired after racing the Tour de France as well earlier this year.
Speaking of tired, our final rider from the signature breakaway of the day, Alberto Losada of Katusha. Half a minute ahead and still almost 5K left to ride.
He's going to need a lot more than that.
¡Vamos, campeón!
9% here, but it will get steeper. Stage 14 figured to be a very pivotal one in the general classification battle, and as such, Alberto Contador in the white jersey had his Saxo Bank team at the front of the field ready to set a very hard tempo.
Tempo they did, but Joaquin Rodriguez all smiles early on because his team just got to sit back and enjoy the ride that Alberto Contador's teammates were putting up forth in the front of the group.
At a very large 16-man breakaway, the biggest of this year's Vuelta. Out front for most of the day, fighting it out for the summits along the way. And we had 5 mountains to climb on the profile for stage 14. Alberto Contador on one of those climbs with a mechanical issue.
Picking up a wheel very quickly there from his teammate, and that's why it's so important to have those guys around. Jesus Hernandez gives him the front wheel. Contador gets back in, and then on the descent, this is a man from the breakaway, Ben Gastower, loses it and goes down pretty hard.
Last man from that 16-man move, Alberto Losada of Katusha, by himself on the final climb, hoping to stay away, but it really was hopeless. He would eventually get caught. And this was the first big acceleration from Contador and the GC riders.
Valverde right on his wheel. Moreno slowly brought up his team leader, Rodriguez, and then a little bit later, 1.9K to go, Contador makes his second big move, and it looked for a while like he may ride away with it, just like we saw about a week ago in this race.
So at this point, On the steepest part of the climb inside the final 2K, Contador was all in for a stage win. But for the second time in this Vuelta, Contador was caught near the line by Joaquim Rodriguez. He didn't give up. He went for the win once again, but at that point, just not much left in the legs.
Contador made that surge well inside the final 400 meters. Rodriguez quick to get on the wheel, and Rodriguez just has a lot more punch, and he came around and picked up some time before he got to the line as well. You'll see him pop off right here.
And at this point, nothing Contador could do to match that, as Joaquim Rodriguez pulled away to his third stage win of this year's race, adding to his lead on the top of the general classification and really driving the dagger in and twisting it on Contador and the others behind him in the GC. So the 33-year-old Spaniard gains more time on the general classification. We'll see how that shapes up when we come back here on Universal Sports. Our general classification after 14 days, Joaquim Rodriguez has built upon his lead. Now a 22-second advantage over Alberto Contador. Chris Froome and Alejandro Valverde tied behind them, 141 off the pace. And what a day for Joaquim Rodriguez. Alberto Contador looked like he had gapped him off and was riding away to a stage victory and the red jersey for the first time in this race. But Rodriguez has proven time and time again that he is better at this Vuelta than he's ever been in a Grand Tour.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think this is the biggest shot he's ever had by far to win a Grand Tour. And that's saying something, because he had a pretty good shot at winning the Giro d'Italia. He lost it in the final day time trial to Ryder Hesjedal. It's going to be hard to unseat him at this point. He's going to have an off day.
And today's Stage 15 live on Universal Sports. Joaquim Rodriguez, with his third stage win of this year's race yesterday, has extended his margin at the top to now 22 seconds on Alberto Contador, while Chris Froome and Alejandro Valverde are tied behind them, 141 off the pace. Hi everyone, Steve Schleicher alongside Todd Gugulski, and coming up today on Stage 15, it is another summit finish, another day to shape the general classification.
Second of 3 consecutive summit finish days in a row, 186.5 kilometers. It's about 116 miles. They've already been over some of the earlier climbs of the day, but what looms in front of them are the 2 big ones, the Mirador and then the Covadonga. 15% maximum, up about 2/3 the way up that climb. It will be another big battle on a legendary Spanish climb.
It is one of the iconic mountain summit finishes of the Vuelta a España, being used today for the 18th time. How will it frame the GC going into the final week? The summit finish and Stage 15 live coming up when we come back on Universal Sports. We are live on Stage 15 of the Vuelta. This is the view from the back of the field on a sunny, warm Sunday, entering the final week of racing in the season's final Grand Tour. And the peloton is in pursuit of another large breakaway today. Yesterday it was 16 riders, today it is 10 who have made their way up the road as the Spanish holiday season rolls on now into this first weekend of September. Along some gorgeous coastline, they have really showed off this country here at the 67th Vuelta this year. The northeast coast, the northwest, and now north central here today on the second to last Sunday of the Vuelta, as the race will end 1 week from today in the Spanish capital of Madrid. But who will win? What will that final podium look like? There are so many stages between now and next Sunday that can shape this GC, that can turn things around. By no means is where we stand on today's stage an indication of where we'll stand 1 week from today when it's all over.
And certainly one of the big differences between today and yesterday's Stage 14 summit finish is look who's on the front of the peloton. This is Katusha, the team of the overall race leader, Joaquim Rodriguez. They are chasing this 10-rider group. Yesterday it was very different. Alberto Contador had his entire team on the front, chasing that large breakaway group all day, trying to make the race as hard as possible. And Rodriguez was able to match Contador at the end. So today, you're not seeing Saxo Bank on the front. It's all up to Katusha. And he's going to have to put his team to work all day, and then they're going to attack him.
Large main field that was split up earlier in the race. There was some chaos in the opening couple of hours as the breakaway was trying to get formed. Various groups that had formed out on the road, things were splitting up. Even Alejandro Valverde, who sits in the top 4 in the GC, was caught a minute behind some of the other GC riders. It's all come back together in the peloton, and now just firmly in pursuit of this 10-rider breakaway that is on the Category 1 climb, the Mirador, that will summit with 40 kilometers left to go in the stage. So they're just about 3.5K away from the top right now, and then that will leave them with the above classification climb at the finish, the summit of Lagos de Covadonga.
Well, in addition to that aggressive racing in the first hour of the race that saw that 40-rider group split off the front of the field and Valverde back behind, they also had a crash that involved Daniel Moreno, and he is one of the chief climbing helpers of Joaquim Rodriguez. If you recall yesterday, when Contador was attacking early on the final climb, it was Moreno who paced Rodriguez back up, and that allowed Rodriguez that little bit of relaxation time, if you will. He didn't have to make the huge push all at once because he had a teammate to close it down.
Is Alan Davis, the sprinter for Oregon Green Edge. He has failed to win a stage despite a lot of work being done by his team in this year's race to this point. And this final week, not a lot of opportunities for the sprinters. It's not like it's all said and done for them, but this is more about the mountains going into the final 7 days of racing than anything, and really determining the final outcome on the general classification.
Yeah, certainly that GC will be hinging on these mountain days, but there are going to be at least 3 days that the guys have a shot at a field sprint, so long as they bring all the breakaways back. On the plus side for Alan Davis and Orica Green Edge, they have seen some great riding by their men from the breakaways, and yesterday Simon Clark went back into the lead of the King of the Mountains jersey after picking up that stage number 4 win earlier on in the race.
The trees blowing up top, so there is some wind out there on the course today in this Asturias region. The Picos de Europa mountain range of northern Spain. Another sunny day. This has not been a Vuelta of inclement weather by any stretch.
Not unless you consider sun and searing temperature inclement weather, because they've dealt with a lot of that.
Really no rain. It's been sunny and largely cloudless just about every day of the race so far, as our breakaway works its way to the upper slopes of this Category 1 climb.
Simon Geschke there on the front for Argo Shimano, the German rider. Nobody in this breakaway group really a threat in the overall. The highest placed man, Kasechkin, the Astana rider from Kazakhstan, 22 minutes, 34 seconds down in the general classification.
So this climb that precedes the final climb, just under 7K long, averaging a little over 8%, with the maximum of just over 11% coming right at the top of the climb. Yesterday they finished with back-to-back Cat 1 climbs, leading to a summit finish. Today, it's a Category 1 that's still a ways out from the finish. It summits with 40K still left to go, but then, instead of another Cat 1 at the finish, they have the Especial, the above classification climb. In Spain, it's known as a specially rated climb. Break it down, it means it's steep.
And Steve Cummings here, what a great ride he had picking up the stage win from the breakaways a couple of days ago, and that was a day that really tested the team of Argo Shimano. They were trying so hard to bring back the breakaway to see if Degenkolb could get his 5th win in a field sprint, but they couldn't bring it down to a field sprint.
So what we have right now is the field being led by Katusha and a 10-man breakaway that still has quite a large lead. At last check, it was at its maximum of 13.5 minutes. And for Joaquim Rodriguez, the overall race leader, he is unconcerned with the breakaway because nobody is a threat on the general classification. He's not worried about time bonuses because he has the lead. He just has to mark the wheels of his top rivals, and in particular, Alberto Contador. So a breakaway, eating up time bonuses and staying ahead to fight out the stage up the road would be perfectly fine for the red jersey.
He's in a little bit of an uncharted territory at this point. He's got to be thinking positively about his opportunities to hold that red jersey all the way through the final week of the race, but he also knows that Alberto Contador continues to get just that little bit better day by day, and he knows it's not over yet. There's going to be a lot of fighting going on.
Now, water recreation with the parasailing, windsurfing means that there is wind on the road as well. How might that affect the outcome of stage 15?
The 2012 Vuelta a Espana is brought to you by GoPro.
Right to the very summit of this climb. Now officially it summits at 40.1 kilometers from the finish. Sometimes that GPS on the screen is just slightly off.
Sometimes, or most of the time.
Pretty much, yeah, always.
Spanish GPS, not the most accurate in the world, but you get the idea that they are close to the top of the climb here. And like yesterday, a few teams with multiple riders. See 2 Caja Rural riders in here.
2 Astana men as well.
And these riders have to realize that they have a great shot at staying away the entire stage and fighting it out for a stage victory as they officially hit the summit of the Cat 1 climb now. So a lead of still well over 14 minutes for a 10-rider breakaway on this 15th day at the Vuelta. Still one big climb, though, left to go at the end. On the profile coming up tomorrow, 3rd consecutive summit finish before the race's 2nd and final rest day on Tuesday. Now today's stage heading north and then dipping back southeast in north-central Spain, heading towards a summit finish that is being used for the 18th time at the Vuelta this year, one of the most majestic, iconic, landmark summit finishes in the race's history. Last time it was used was back in 2010, won by Carlos Barredo.
Barredo actually taking the win from a breakaway, which definitely looks like we're going to see the same sort of scenario play out today. The breakaway attacking this descent, and you can see how it splitting things up just that little bit as some guys a little bit more comfortable at the breakneck speeds flying down around the corners than others.
The breakaway has already gone over the summit of the Cat 1. They're on the descent with the peloton still climbing. And so far behind that they have quite a lot of climbing still to do before they get to the crest of the hill. Second straight day we've seen a large breakaway go up the road. Yesterday it was 16 riders, today it is 10, but much more leash to work with today. Yesterday they had more riders, but they got less time. Only about 3 minutes or so at its maximum point. Today we have fewer riders, but 4 times as much time as they had yesterday.
It's different day by day just simply because of the way the dynamics play out. Lloyd Mondry here just trailing off the back a little bit. Doesn't look like he's in trouble. He's just kind of relaxing on the descent. And one of the big differences, Steve, between yesterday's profile and today's is that yesterday was more relentless. And they just had climb after climb after climb. So there was a lot more total climbing in all. And so Saxo Bank wanted to keep the pressure on all day and see if they could crack Rodriguez. since they were unable to, and today is not as difficult a profile, there's no reason for them to try and drill it all day and crack Rodriguez that way. They need to figure out another way to crack him, and maybe that's by using up his team and isolating him sooner at the end.
Rodriguez does have his team at the front here in the red and white. That is Katusha. On the far left-hand side, the dark colors, that is Team Sky, the squad of Chris Froome. And on the right-hand side, orange and blue, the team of Rabobank, a squad that has 3 riders in the top 10 on the GC. But by their own admission, they had a very bad day collectively yesterday. Robert Haysink, in particular, just couldn't keep up with the best climbers at the end, and he's a guy who says that he has aspirations of being on the podium in Madrid 1 week from today, but didn't do himself any favors on stage 14.
Yeah, he didn't. He probably is having to revisit those aspirations, and you can see Mondry here grabbing looked like a bottle. And you know, we've talked about this before, you're actually not allowed to feed out of a car on a climb or a descent, but we see it regularly. It's just part of bike racing, but it's the reason why the rule is there is because it's dangerous. Let's face it, when you're holding on to a bottle with your handlebars 6 inches off the side of the car going through these corners, bad things can happen.
Almost 70 kilometers per hour. All it takes is that one moment of inattentiveness, or you lose your balance, or just the briefest of moments, and all of a sudden you're on the deck.
Yeah, there are a lot of accidents that occur between the riders and the various caravan vehicles. And it's surprising, actually, there are not more. I mean, there are many, many days in professional cycling where nothing happens, but it's just, they're always so close to being in trouble.
David de la Fuente with the points over the top of the Cat 1 climb. And as you can see, the slow and steady pace of the field here down below means they are still going uphill. We do have one intermediate sprint coming up before the last climb. That'll be with just over 22K left to go. So here's the story. The breakaway on the descent, the field still climbing, and a lot of time between the two, well over 13 minutes. Chris Froome has lost time on the last 4 critical stages. The time trial, 3 summit finishes. He's lost time in each of those stages. And now taking him down to 141 off the pace of our overall leader, but still in contention for the podium.
And, you know, you have to appreciate, this is Juanjo Cobo setting the tempo here, the defending champion. So he's adding to the work being done by Katusha as they go over the top. 12:51 back. What I was going to say about Froome is you have to appreciate his attitude toward the race, how he's been attacking the race in the first week. And even yesterday, even when he was losing time at the end, before that he had been dropped, he caught back up to the contenders, he attacked them, then they dispatched him for real. I appreciate his style, but I think that maybe he's a little bit too eager and he needs to be conserving, especially in the first week, some of that strength for this last week.
And the field with Froome near the front, now on the descent of the Category 1, with our leaders under 30K left to go to the finish of the stage. Now, history was against Chris Froome from the start, because this century, only one rider has been on the podium at both the Tour de France and the Vuelta a Espana in the same year. That was Carlos Sastre back in 2008, when he, of course, won the Tour de France and then came back to finish on the podium of the Vuelta a couple of months later. So it underscores the difficulty of going back-to-back with the season's last 2 Grand Tours and finishing in the top 3 of both. And that's what Froome is trying to do this year.
And Carlos was not third in the Olympic Games time trial in between the races either. And so that is what really complicated Froome's plan and his goals to try and come back to the Vuelta after being second last year and try and win it this year.
And the plan for the breakaway now is to make it all the way to the finish with a comfortable lead, and then may the best man win. And considering their large margin still to play with, they are probably starting to think and talk tactics now as to how to get the best of the situation. Talking with teammates in the breakaway, talking with the team car. It is a summit finish, so that will also complicate the dynamics. But when you're down to 10 men, you haven't won a stage, looking for that first taste of Grand Tour glory, and you have this kind of opportunity, you got to take advantage, as there's a rider in the ditch. It looked like Daniel Teclahimeno, who was in the gutter there on the descent. And the cars just blew right past, and we only got a quick glimpse. Let's take another look.
I do believe you are correct.
The Eritrean. Now, he's the rider from Orica Green Edge. Didn't see the crash, just saw the very brief remnants of it.
Teclahimeno in the Eritrean National Road Champions jersey, so looking a little different than his Orica teammates. But the breakaway here, look at how smooth. They know at this point this is more or less academic for them. They just got to keep rolling along here. Everybody thinking about attacking this final climb and trying to get a stage win. None of these guys have had a stage win at this year's Vuelta.
So the intermediate sprint is just about 4K away, and then that final climb will start with 13.5 kilometers left to go. And another look at the crash. So just off the descent, going to that grassy gutter area. Very difficult, twisting technical descent off the Cat 1 climb. Everybody over the top and now heading downhill. Garmin Sharp rider on the side of the road as we come back.
And letting his team director in the car know that he's standing on the side of the road needing a rear wheel.
So the second issue we've seen on the descent of the Category 1 Mirador climb.
And unfortunately, when you're on a descent like this, it's pretty hard to keep riding a puncture and wait for your team car to work its way up through the caravan to the back of the field to pull over. You can't negotiate these corners at a high rate of speed. If it's in a flat section of the course, you'll try and ride that wheel as long as possible because it makes your chase that much shorter once you finally get your wheel.
Single file on this snaking descent. It'll drop down to the intermediate sprint area before heading back up for the final 13.5K. Thomas Decker was the rider for Garmin Sharp, who was on the side of the road waiting for service. Riding his first Grand Tour in the last several years. And everyone now back together in the breakaway after some breakup on the descent.
Great efforts over the course of this Vuelta so far by Decker's teammate Andrew Talansky, sitting in 8th place in the overall classification right now after a very solid 6th place yesterday, where he was just yo-yoing off the back of the group of the few contenders in front of him, but they ultimately dispatched him. He lost just 44 seconds by the finish line yesterday.
The lead hovering just under 13 minutes with 23 kilometers left to go, so a K away from the final intermediate sprint of the afternoon. Kevin Sealdreers of Espana rolling to the front, now giving way to Lloyd Mondery.
Back at the front of the peloton, a lot of work falling on the shoulders of Katusha, but still, if you notice, 12-minute, 51-second gap. No danger for the general classification. So they really just get to keep things in check back in the peloton. They don't have to go crazy.
Are you surprised that Saxo Bank has not put more pressure on today the way they did yesterday?
I'm really not, because yesterday Katusha, primarily Joaquim Rodriguez, was able to answer all the pressure at the end, and it was a harder stage leading up to the end, so if they were going to crack him, they had a much better chance yesterday. Now tomorrow is another really hard mountain day, harder than today, and it, yes, is another summit finish. So tomorrow we may see Saxo Bank getting to the front earlier and try to put that pressure on.
For now, Katusha is controlling the tempo at the front of the field, still very much on the descent of the Category 1 climb, as our leaders should just about be up to the intermediate sprints. Gap has really not come down all that much. It got up to around 15 minutes at one point, so it's come down a little over a minute since then, but nothing substantial, as this is the town where the intermediate sprints will be held before they start climbing once again up to the summit finish. Now they're headed towards the Lagos de Covadonga climb at the end of the stage, where a lot of prolific Vuelta riders have won over the years. Names like Laurent Jalabert, Pedro Delgado, Pavel Tonkov.
Yeah, some pretty big names in the sport of cycling. And Brito, now the race leader, has won 3 stages in the race leader's jersey. And it's been a long time since anybody's been able to actually do that while leading the Vuelta. In fact, it was back all the way to 1995, where Laurent Jalabert won 4 stages while he was leading the race.
So with this breakaway looking more and more like it's going to take it all the way home today, but with the tough final climb, the summit finish, who are you liking from that move? If everybody stays together, let's assume all 10 riders have a shot, who do you like from that breakaway to potentially win the stage?
One of the guys that's showing that he really wants it today is Kashekin. He's the Kazakh rider. He's got a teammate in there, Seeldreyers, and Seeldreyers has been doing a little bit more work than Kashekin. And Kashekin is the guy who is the highest place in the general classification, 22 minutes down. So he's looking to make a big jump in the GC as well as try and get a stage win. But, you know, there are other guys in that break that have good climbing legs, and I wouldn't count out some guys that maybe are a little bit less familiar on people's radar screen, like Antonio Piedra. He's a Caja Rural rider in the break, and he actually was talking about the stage before the race today and saying that since Garate won this stage the last time in the Vuelta from a break, he wanted to try and do it today.
It's funny, Astana has 2 riders in the group. Both of them are at the front, and it's actually another Astana rider, Paulo Tiralongo, who said he was solely focused on trying to win this particular stage, yet he didn't make the move 2 of his teammates did.
Yeah, well, there's definitely no science to getting into these breaks. You have to follow numerous attacks and hope that the one that you get into sticks, and quite often that's not how it works. Yesterday, Simon Clark was just taking turns with his teammates covering breaks for Orica Green Edge. He didn't actually want to be in the break because he had been in the break the day before. He ended up making the move that stuck, and then he said, well, I'm here, I'm going for the mountains jersey, and now he's leading the competition.
So our leaders have 20K left to go, and a lead of almost 13 minutes over this main field led by Katusha, and not a lot of importance right now being expressed by this field and bringing that break back. So we'll just tell you who's wearing what jersey so you can find the riders, and we'll go from there.
Indeed, and today the mountains classification is very much hanging in the balance because Clark has only a 4-point advantage over Rodriguez, and there are a bunch of points at the finish line today for a Cat 1. Actually, it's a Especial, so I don't even have that. A Cat 1 is 10 points. Let me look up the points on a beyond classification climb.
You can see it in the distance going up to the 2 glacial lakes known as Covadonga. That climb will start pretty shortly for our leaders. 13.5K from the summit is where the road starts to go uphill. They have 15.5K left to go in the stage, so 2K away from starting the last climb. Well over 4 hours in, and back here in the field, Katusha still cranking away at the front of the peloton. Team Sky is up there, Movistar, Saxo Bank, and Rabobank. The teams you would expect. Contador's in the middle of the screen in a white jersey. This is really the first time we've seen him all day long.
Been pretty casual for him so far. At the finish today, 15 points for the win, 10 for second, 6 for third. So actually, because those points don't go down super deep at the finish, it looks like Clark should be all right with all that huge breakaway up the road. They're not going to catch that many, if any, of these guys.
What do you think about the chances, even if it's not today, but on one of the other summit finishes, of Contador launching one of his trademark attacks from lower on a mountain, as opposed to waiting until the final 2K or something like that? Something that comes much further down the mountain, 7, maybe 8K to go. We've seen him do it before, right away, take the stage, take the overall win as a result. What do you think about this man here in the white jersey, Contador, going long on one of these remaining mountain stages?
Well, it would make sense that he would do that as he rides right behind Chris Froome in the bunch. He would do that if he felt he had the legs to back it up. What's been happening is he just hasn't quite had what it takes to keep it going. He opens up the gap, but then he stalls out just a little bit. And that's what's allowing Rodriguez to catch him at the end of these climbs. So certainly you're right, Steve. That's the tactic if he can keep going. The problem is he hasn't been able to keep going.
All the top GC riders, Contador, Rodriguez, and the others, said coming in that the key stages for this year's race would be the time trial, which we had in the middle of the second week, and then these 3 consecutive summit finishes beginning yesterday, concluding tomorrow, and of course featuring today's summit finish on stage 15 as well. But given the fact it's still so tight, with Rodriguez and Contador at the top of the GC, separated by just 22 seconds. What do you think are the chances this thing could come down to the very final weekend?
The Bola del Mundo is certainly a day where the whole race could very easily be in play. It's a really wicked climb. It's the hardest climb they'll be doing of the entire bike race. They'll also have 20 days of racing in their legs when they hit the top of it. So it is a savage day. We saw an absolutely incredible battle the first time it was used 2 seasons ago, when Nibali barely held on to Mosquera's wheel as they got to the top and saved his jersey, but he was in trouble. He had been dropped. We could see a very similar dynamic play out this year.
So our 10-man breakaway is coming up on the final 14 minutes. It's been holding over 13 for the last couple of hours. So these guys now on the final climb, set to fight it out for a stage win on a landmark stage in Vuelta history.
It's already starting to heat up here. This is where somebody's dreams will be realized, and all these other guys will have their dreams broken on this climb.
Some early accelerations happening in the first kilometer of the climb.
Straight away as these guys go for it on the climb.
Still all 10 together as they started the climb. A very healthy number of riders. Haven't had to do a whole lot of work because the peloton really hasn't been chasing all that hard behind them. So you might have some relatively fresh legs here on this final climb.
That was Andrei Kashechkin on the right there in the blue Astana colors that was putting in that first acceleration. He also has his teammate Seeldreyers, the Belgian. Both of those guys are pretty good climbers. So we'll see if one of them has the legs to get something done here. Obviously, it's always great to have a teammate with you because you can attack and counterattack off of each other.
Field a ways away back. And here comes another attack. And that is Seeldreyers up the road.
You know, that's how you got to play the game. Use your strength in numbers. Force other guys to do the chasing.
And quickly getting a gap here.
Ruben Perez for Euskaltel taking the chase up. Here goes Lastras. Lastras, a winner from a breakaway of a stage of the Vuelta last year. the Movistar rider, the Spaniard. He's won stages of all 3 Grand Tours, so he's closing it down. Watch Koshechkin now. Light blue jersey, looking back. 5th wheel.
So the time bonuses will be taken up by the riders in the breakaway. Back here in the field, we'll see if there is any kind of a battle for the GC on that climb. Katusha patrolling the front of the peloton. Lampre in the pink and blue has also come up towards the front, and in the middle, there in the dark colors, that is Team Sky, led by Ian Stannard, the British National Road Champion in the white.
Stannard's a big motor. He does a lot of work for these guys on the rolling terrain and the flatter sections. He's not a great climber, but man, he can put his horsepower to use on everything except for the big climbs.
This is the battle in the breakaway. A lot of times on a summit finish, when you get down to the final climb, the breakaway is just thinking about trying to survive as long as possible, knowing that the GC riders will most likely eventually catch them. But today, they understand it's a different sort of dynamic. They have the opportunity to fight it out for a stage win on a summit finish as opposed to just waiting for that catch to come.
That's a really nice place to find yourself when you know that you have such a large gap that you can play all kinds of games on the final climb.
11% here. Some riders suffering more than others. 15% closer to the top.
And mostly what we're looking at here is this sort of poker game. It's not flat out where everybody is right at their limit. This is looking around, looking at each other, and trying to figure out who's going to do the chasing. Antonio Piedra, the man who said he wanted to win this stage from the break, is the Caja Rural rider who's up the road. But now Astana taking up the chase. Remember, Astana is the only other team that has 2. Geschke for Argo Shimano, the German. Now he's going.
And now Lostros responds.
And so they just kind of trickle up that way off the front. And typically when you get a lot of guys trickling across, they kind of serve as the steps in a ladder, and everybody starts climbing on, and they make their way back up to the riders in front.
Well, very much a game, though, within the breakaway here. It's a long way to go, so how many accelerations do you have? How much energy can you burn? And still have something left there at the finish. That's one of the things I'll be asking.
Yeah, Piedra not really getting a lot of space. He doesn't actually seem to have the best climbing legs, but he is winning the battle as it's really being a tactical battle on this climb and nobody really taking up the chase. Notice he's got his teammate right up there towards the front, number 56, David de la Fuente, and he'll just sort of try to make everybody calm and not want to chase his teammate.
Yeah, don't worry, let him go.
Yeah,
he'll be fine.
He's, you know,
You'll
he's
get him
not
later.
that big a threat. No big deal, guys.
Well, he's out of sight right now.
He certainly is.
So when will the response come? Right now, they're biding their time with still over 10K left to go on the final climb of the day. Antonio Piedra of Caja Rural is the leader on the final climb. This is the field, over 13 minutes back. And under 10K left to go for our leader, who has attacked from a 10-man breakaway on the last climb of stage 15. And the field is 5K now behind our leader. Here comes the rest of the breakaway under the 10K banner, and they're right around 20 seconds or so behind Piedra, and now it's up to almost half a minute. So that is Ruben Perez in the orange and black of Euskaltel, who's finally starting to motor up the road a little bit.
Seal Dreyer's right on his wheel, now sliding off to the left side of our screen. De La Fuente there, just trying once again to kind of be the fly in the ointment, if you will, with these guys. Not really getting in their way, but not helping the chase, obviously.
The sanctuary of Covadonga. Vicenta Cueva Holy Cave that's right underneath it is a big pilgrimage site. One of the many landmarks along the way on this last climb in the Asturias.
It's a very interesting moment here in this chasing group, as nobody has really taken this thing by the horns, and they're just looking at each other. Meanwhile, Piedra is continuing to get that little bit of time up the road by going steady. He's really, I don't think he's the best climber in the group, but he's looking for this tactical opportunity and exploiting it very well right now.
Sometimes you got to take your chances and hope that the right dynamic unfolds behind you that allows you to stay away. Again, the field, well back, have never really been a threat to catch the breakaway today. Now it's Sky at the front, and Stannard setting the tempo. Chris Froome just off the pace, 4.5 hours in. Katusha is on the left-hand side in the red and white, in the yellow, blue, and black on the right-hand side. Then Saxo Bank, the team of Alberto Contador. Froome sitting fourth wheel for Team Sky at the front. And now back to our leader, Antonio Piedra, 26-year-old from Sevilla, Spain. Been a pro for 5 years now. Biggest win of his career earlier this year, the Rogaland GP, where, ironically enough, he won the race by soloing to victory ahead of a group and winning by 35 seconds.
And also very interesting in that Norwegian race, Simon Clark, the King of the Mountains leader at this year's Vuelta, was second. And it had been several years, actually, before that Piedra had his previous victory. Back in 2009, he won stage 5 of the Tour of Portugal, his only 2 wins of his career. Rogaland a 1.1, which is 2 notches below this, and things are heating up in the peloton.
Now the time bonuses may not be in play, but Saxo Bank certainly now trying to make this a GC battle going into the final climb.
Okay, well, the lull is over, and now Saxo Bank making it very hard. Look at Contador. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men in front of him, and then it's Katusha, and then a few riders back. You can see Froome by himself.
Speaking of the Holy Cave, there it is.
There it is. Beautiful.
Seems to me kind of hard to get to, but from this perspective, all looks good.
That's part of the mystique, Schlanger. It adds to it.
All right, so what about this play by Saxo Bank? Again, we highlighted earlier, it's not the hardest day among these trio of summit finishes, and the time bonuses may not be a factor with the riders up the road, but as our peloton starts this final climb with Saxo Bank out front, what do you think about this move from Contador's team?
I think it's exactly what we expected. They have not done any work all day, in stark contrast to yesterday, and look at that. They are blowing the field apart. It's Moreno and Rodriguez tacked on behind them, and some other guys scrambling to get across. Valverde in the green jersey just made it up there as well.
The Saxo Bank riders off the front.
These guys putting as much pressure as they can. And really, I don't think they should be letting one of their men go off the front. I think they should be sticking on his wheel and just trying to ratchet up the pace as much as possible. This is Nairo Quintana, the Movistar rider, who is trying to go across.
Now Daniel Navarro is the rider who's getting a gap here as Quintana tries to bridge, and then the GC riders back here at the bottom of the screen.
And maybe what this means is that we're going to see Contador trying to go across to Navarro and then actually have some help, have somebody to pace him. And maybe he will do that tack from a little further out today, Steve, that you were asking about earlier.
So Contador's in the white jersey. Joaquim Rodriguez right behind him in the red leader's jersey. On Rodriguez's right shoulder in the green is Alejandro Valverde. These are the leaders, the remnants of the breakaway. Now out to our stage leader, Antonio Piedra, with 8K left to go. So the pace in the field with the GC riders has certainly intensified here on the final climb of stage 15 of the Vuelta. That general classification battle from what's left of the peloton. Saxo Bank riding near the front. Alberto Contador in a white jersey. On the far right-hand side of the screen, Alejandro Valverde in green. And another big move by Saxo Bank, countered by Movistar.
Yeah, Quintana once again jumping on the wheel here. So Contador is launching various lieutenants up the road, trying to have them establish a little bit of a gap. It's got to be so that he can then jump up to them, because what we've seen in these previous summit finishes is that he goes away from Rodriguez, but then he stalls out. If he can get on a wheel of a teammate who can pace him a little bit and they can trade off, it could make all the difference. Now Contador has two. He's got Navarro as well as
now that would be Jesus Hernandez.
it does look like Hernandez. So two men up the road. Piedra here definitely churning along, not looking great, certainly not climbing at a breakneck speed, but he's got that gap on the chasers.
Well, there are three distinctly difficult sections of this Lagos de Covadonga climb. Altogether, it's 13.5K, averaging 7%. The maximum of 15% occurs with just over 4K to go to the summit finish. There are also two little downhill sections, one from 3.5K to 3K to go, the other from right around 1.5 kilometers to 500 meters. So two small, quick downhill sections near the top of the climb, as well as the steepest part of the climb, all in the final 5K.
So Jesus Hernandez is absolutely tearing up this climb. And he's not doing this for himself. They have a plan, and they're trying to execute it to get rid of Rodriguez.
Joaquim Rodriguez said yesterday the pace that Saxo Bank set all day long on stage 14 almost made him come unglued and unable to follow at the end. He says if they continue to ride at that pace, he may not be able to keep up. Today, Saxo Bank has not been at the front until just recently. It's been Rodriguez's Katusha team doing all the work. This is just off the front of that GC group. It's left to the peloton.
So things get a little bit interesting in the group, because they're not just riding this crazy hard pace up the climb and then letting their team leaders slug it out. Guys are jumping them, getting up the road, and their leaders are going to try and go across.
Antonio Piedra, now well over a minute after attacking from the 10-man breakaway. So he's put a lot of time into those other breakaway riders.
It's very steep in through here where he is too. Anywhere between 8.5% and 11%, and look at this, 15% where he is right now. So very tough part of this climb. Igor Anton is a guy who has been trying to maintain his position in the top 10, and he's up the road right now with Daniel Navarro and Nairo Quintana.
And also Ahmed Charuka of the Euskaltel team, Anton's teammate. So they are just ahead of the peloton, which you can see in the background. Now Anton, once one of the landmark summit finishes to add to his stage collection at the Vuelta a Espana. Not much of a player for the GC since this race started. So this would certainly qualify as the type of stage he would like to win, but still well behind on the road. I mean, when this field came to the final climb, they were already about 13 minutes down. And a Cajo Rural rider now accelerating forward.
Just kind of shocking to me, actually, to see a Cajo Rural rider attacking. He's got two men up the road. One is solo trying to win the race. There's not even a top 10 spot for the stage available at this point. And I don't know what he's thinking he's going to get out of that. Sometimes you feel good, you have to stretch the legs, I guess.
You think you're going to help your teammate or something in the heat of the moment. Again, this is just off the front of all the GC riders. Igor Anton, number 71, sitting at the back of this group. And now our leader. Antonio Piedra, the 26-year-old Spaniard from Sevilla, on the steepest part of the climb, the last ascent on stage 15 leading up to a summit finish. He attacked from a 10-man breakaway. He has over a minute on his chasers. And this is another small group that's formed off the front of what's left of the peloton, just ahead of all the main GC contenders like Contador, Froome, Rodriguez, and Valverde. As we move back up to Piedra, half a dozen K from the finish of the stage.
Doing a fantastic job. He's still got some more 15% grades to tackle in front of him. But look at the team director in the car giving him all the encouragement possible. And it looks like Majka has also made it up to the group in front of the field. So Contador now has 2 or 3 riders in front of the peloton that he could jump up to and have help to pace him over the top.
At this point, it does not look, though, like time bonuses are going to come into play, though, for the GC riders.
And notice we're not getting those time splits anymore, as there's a lot changing on this climb. But they had over 13 minutes at the base of the climb, and I just don't see that actually being something that they can close down.
Joaquim Rodriguez in the red jersey near the front of this group. In the green behind him, Alejandro Valverde. And back to our leader, Piedra. Now Saxo Bank gathering numbers here.
Yeah, Majka now going on the attack from that group that was just in front of the peloton. You can see Navarro behind him, his teammate looking back, looking for Alberto. Charuca there chasing in the orange for Euskaltel. A couple wheels behind him is his leader, Anton.
Looks like Haysink for Rabobank that just rode through the top of the screen.
Very interesting. Maybe there's still some fight left in the dog after all.
He had a bad day yesterday, and he's trying to not only protect his top 5 on the GC, but he thinks he can move up onto the podium. So he has to start making some moves and attacking if he's going to do that.
Jan Bakelant's at the back here for Radio Shack Nissan, the Belgian, struggling a fair bit to maintain contact.
So this is a Saxo Bank Euskaltel Movistar battle here right now.
Majka, Charuca, Quintana, Anton, Navarro, and you can't see the rest of them.
They don't have much time though. Antonio Piedra, our leader. Now remember, in the final few kilometers, he does have a couple of quick downhill sections before he kicks back up right at the end in the final half K to the summit finish. Looks like it's going to come back together here.
It does look like Robert Haysink, that was the Rabobank man in the orange and blue who tried to go across, but he is now being sucked up by the Katusha-led peloton of Rodriguez's teammate. A little bit of a tailwind here in parts of this climb. That's very good for a breakaway rider.
The GC group here, reeling these riders back in.
And Majka just continuing to set that tempo for his leader, Contador.
And the action at the back of the field. We still haven't seen a move, though, from Contador. Nothing from Valverde. Chris Froome has not put in a big acceleration. You don't expect much from Joaquim Rodriguez. He's just going to ride defensively and mark the wheels of those other riders.
That's really all he should be doing on a day like today, especially because there are no time bonuses that these guys are going to be able to fight for, because they're not going to be fighting for the top 3 spots. If there were a time bonus, well, you might see Rodriguez go for it a little bit right at the end.
Tomorrow's an even tougher day, so why not save yourself? Now another acceleration as the group is brought back. Movistar rider once again surging forward.
It's Quintana one more time. The only Colombian on the otherwise all Spanish roster here at the Vuelta for that squad.
No response from anyone else. first few accelerations, but once he got clear and out of sight, nobody has come up to him. Nobody's been even close.
And when you think about what he was talking about at the beginning of the day, 101 out of the saddle, Joaquin Rodriguez, Talansky right behind him, 91. Talansky, a sterling performance yesterday at the top of the mountain. And our white jersey, Alberto Contador, 201 out of the saddle, right behind him in the green, Alejandro Valverde. Those are the GC men, but this man, Chris Froome, is missing from the equation. Steve, he's in big trouble right now. He's got both of his Colombian men in front of him, Now and Rigoberto Urán, and they're going to try and close down gaps for him as they open, but he's certainly in trouble.
This is Sink. 5 minutes back. Oh, here goes Valverde with Contador on his wheel. Rodriguez behind Contador.
Okay, let the games begin. 2.5K for the leader, but these guys are well down behind them. They've got a lot further to climb.
Valverde in the green, Contador the white, Rodriguez the red. No Chris Froome. He has been dropped.
Chris Froome is not going to even have a chance to respond to this. He's doing damage control, but Valverde really digging in hard.
Here is Froome. Back with his teammates, but losing time.
And gaps opening up in front of him.
Contador has a teammate coming up alongside.
That's Igor Antone and Quintana. Majka there, the teammate for Alberto Contador, trying to do one last pull, but you saw him just in agony as he blew sky high and swung off.
Antonio Piedra, again, is still a leader on the stage, but this is the GC battle behind him. Still 6 kilometers left to go to the summit finish for them, so almost 4K behind our leader right now.
And notice that Valverde has Nairo Quintana, the Colombian climbing ace there, to try and make things extra hard for the other men.
There's Navarro there for Saxo Bank, who is being dropped. So Quintana just ahead of his teammate Valverde, who is just ahead of Contador, then Rodriguez, and then Igor Antone, who they have passed now on this climb. Alejandro Valverde launching the first acceleration from our top GC riders on this last climb of stage 15. Now back to the leader on the stage, Antonio Piedra, Caja Rural, 2K to go.
Well, Quintana came into this race in good form after just winning the overall classification at the Ruta do Sud, which ended just in the middle of the month of June. And so he's putting that form into very good work right now to help his team leader, Alejandro Valverde.
And look at that gap that's forming back to where Chris Froome is.
Ooh, and Chris Froome off the back of that large chasing group. So Froome, the wheels are actually starting to come off the cart a little bit for him. He knew it was going to be a close one, wondering if he still had enough left in the tank, and it's obvious that he doesn't.
20 seconds now on Chris Froome for these 4 riders. And here comes Contador. His first attack of the day. Rodriguez is the first to respond.
Okay, well, this is a long way out. This is very early for what we've seen him doing so far. Rodriguez definitely has the strength to respond, but will he be able to stay with him?
Valverde trying to close the gap. Contador sees that he has Rodriguez with him, looks over the other shoulder and also recognizes Valverde. So this is right now the battle for the podium, with Chris Froome losing time. Froome, it looks like, will be losing time for the 4th consecutive mountain stage.
Now Froome's chances for, certainly for the win, are over. And
maybe the podium.
Probably the podium as well.
Now Valverde to the front, ahead of Contador. This again our leader. His 2nd downhill section. This is the final one for Antonio Piedra. And just about home free it looks like right now for the 26-year-old from Sevilla as he hits the final kilometer.
He's looking picture perfect here. And how often is it that you hear a guy talking about how they want to win from the breakaway because one of their countrymen did it in this race a couple of years ago in 2010. They go out, they execute, and it looks like he's got it.
Goes back uphill in the final half a kilometer to the summit finish of the Lagos de Covadonga. And now going back on the uphill section to the end of the stage for our leader.
Quintana back on the front, setting the tempo, but Piedra, by far, by a long shot, the biggest win of his career, and he did a beautiful job to get it.
Exactly 5 hours in, and Antonio Piedra, our 5th different first-time Grand Tour stage winner at this year's Vuelta, as he brings it home to win stage 15.
Completely unchallenged. At first, he started barely eking out that gap when he got away from the other chasers, but then he got into that rhythm.
Time to savor it as well, attacking from a 10-man breakaway, and none of those riders even in sight as he crosses the line for the stage win.
5 hours into the day, he gets his first Grand Tour win. Contador coming from behind, the element of surprise. And look at this, no response.
The second acceleration on the final climb for Contador.
Now the problem here for Alberto is that Valverde has a teammate. Quintana will work to close it down.
Now Rodriguez going by Quintana.
Well, the problem also is that Valverde can't follow his teammate, so it's not actually hurting Contador that Valverde has a teammate.
Now here comes Rodriguez, trying to slowly work his way back up to Contador, just like he did yesterday, reeling him in each and every time he attacked. But also keep in mind, these attacks by Contador, this is just about as much about tomorrow as it is today, continuing to make Rodriguez suffer on the climbs.
Indeed, he's trying to wear him down. He's trying to crack him. 4K to go. There's still a while here for these guys.
And Rodriguez does indeed pull Contador back.
And he will not take a single pull. He'll just sit there, he'll look at him, he'll taunt him and try and make him think he's okay.
22 seconds between these two as the day started.
And look at this stalemate as they slow down. This gives Valverde a chance to make it back up to him.
Contador, his third acceleration.
Well, we knew that was coming, and we're going to keep seeing those types of efforts from him.
Trying to work over Rodriguez.
It's a lot harder to get the element of surprise when you got one guy watching you. He's not able to come from the back of the group of 4 like he did on his last attack.
But the repeated accelerations may eventually have a cumulative toll on Rodriguez. That's what Contador is counting on.
You know, honestly, the thing about Rodriguez is he's got the punch also. And it almost seems to me like Contador would be better served to try and grind him off, especially with this tailwind. But look at this, Quintana comes by with Rodriguez. That actually is helpful, or with Valverde, that's helpful to Contador.
So Valverde right behind his teammate, then Rodriguez, followed by Contador. Now, yesterday it was Rodriguez who had the teammate in the final few kilometers on the summit finish. Today it is Valverde. Contador, sans teammates here in the final few K.
He certainly would benefit if he had Moreno with him or one of his other climbing specialists, but he doesn't have that opportunity.
Downhill section, 1 of 2 in the final few K for our top riders on the GC. 3K left to go to the finish. Again, Antonio Piedra of Caja Rural has already won the stage from a breakaway. He rode into a solo win. And now we're just waiting to see how the top 3 on the GC are going to finish. What kind of gaps may open up here. How it may change the top of the standings.
Contador deployed both his teammates Jesus Hernandez and Benjamin Noval and tried to go up to them, but it just never panned out.
Chris Froome has been losing time. Not once has he matched an acceleration from these riders here on this final climb of the day. He has been struggling, laboring at the back of the peloton. Valverde alongside his teammate Rodriguez right behind, and then Contador sitting at the very back. And this is where he's launched his attacks from so far today, when he's been behind his other two rivals.
And it really doesn't look like Contador has gotten close to cracking Rodriguez with those attacks. 43 seconds now back to Froome.
And this is Chris Froome right here. He's isolated.
He's got his Colombian teammates just trying to set the
There
tempo
goes
in front.
Contador again, once more from the back of the group, and then Rodriguez is there to respond too.
Yeah, so there's no way Valverde can respond to these attacks. He's just at his limit. He's got to ride steady, but these guys just thrashing each other.
Contador hoping to get better with each summit finish going into the final week. But can he get good enough to shake free Joaquim Rodriguez? So far, he hasn't been able to ride him off his wheel. And Rodriguez just riding defensively. He's just marking.
Not a lot of room in that road to attack from behind.
So Rodriguez just sitting at the front here. Valverde has made it back up with Quintana. So it's a group of four once again. And again, Contador doing everything he can. Relentless attacking, trying to somehow shed Joaquim Rodriguez, burn him off his wheel. But each and every time, Rodriguez has an answer.
Contador's attacking again up the right, and immediately Rodriguez responding. Those two guys are so incredibly even matched.
Valverde this time, quicker to respond, and Contador just will not give up. He is going to keep attacking.
And so is Valverde possibly? That would be too much.
Now just looking at each other here in the closing kilometers. Time bonuses are out of play. Keep that in mind. A large breakaway was up the road when the GC rider started this final climb. Chris Froome losing his podium spot potentially. Quintana now launching a move. Valverde and Rodriguez look over at each other. Contador sitting behind them with 2K to go. This is where Contador has repeatedly attacked from, behind his two main rivals.
They got a downhill that starts about 1,300 meters from the finish.
We've seen more attacking here at this year's Vuelta in the first 2 weeks than we have at the Tour de France, the Giro, both races combined. It has been spectacular. And more attacks still to come. Valverde waiting, but now Contador goes once again, and there's Rodriguez right on his wheel.
And did you see Rodriguez? He actually sensed Contador was attacking and started matching the acceleration before he even got past.
At what point does it just wear psychologically on Contador? Because he has to realize that Rodriguez just is not going to get dropped.
Yeah, Rodriguez is showing that he has what it takes on these long climbs day after day to continue to make it happen.
Chris Froome grinding away, half a minute down, trying to bring those guys back, at least within sight, at least not to lose too much time. Clearly not at their level. Quintana, Valverde, Rodriguez, and Contador in that order here. Coming up on the final kilometer of stage 15, already won by Antonio Piedra of Caja Rural.
All right, some downhill, and then just inside of 500 meters from the finish, a little bit of uphill to the finish, but no time bonuses. I would say this has been a bit of a draw here today between these guys.
Contador certainly playing the long game, though, trying to soften up Rodriguez for the final mountain stages, wear him down with the gradual process of attrition. These repeated attacks, not just about today, but about the final week here in the season's final Grand Tour as well.
Certainly tomorrow is a day that is more suited to the high alpine men even than today. 1K to go for these guys.
Froome back here in this group. How much time will he lose on the day? Start of the day, tied for third with Valverde, 141 down. Valverde is up here with Rodriguez and Contador, as well as his teammate Quintana. The banner is where the road goes back uphill to the finish of the stage. Does Contador have one more big attack left in him?
I don't see him getting any time here at the end. 300 meters to go. Valverde already starting to wind it up. Rodriguez in the perfect spot to look after any gaps from Contador.
200 meters to the line. Valverde out front, followed by Rodriguez and then Contador. This is not for the stage win. Keep that in mind. Time bonuses have been eaten up. This is just about any kind of physical gaps that may form, and it doesn't look like there will be any. Valverde in green, Rodriguez in red, Contador in white. They finish together.
All right, big battle between those guys. Unfortunately, the bad news for Chris Froome is he lost time. He came in tied with Valverde, 141 down, tied for third. He'll kiss that one goodbye today. Let's see if he can get the legs back for tomorrow, but he seems to be getting worse day by day.
This is Igor Antone. So our top three, led by Valverde, as they cross the line, finished well over 9 minutes back of our stage winner. And now the Chris Froome group, finishing right around a half a minute behind.
And Talansky was in that move as well.
All right, so that brings us to the end of stage 15. We'll sort things out when we come back with the post-race report here on Universal Sports. And the GC coming in features Joaquim Rodriguez as the leader by 22 seconds on Alberto Contador. Alejandro Valverde, 141 back. Chris Froome has lost time. He's over 2 minutes down, with Daniel Moreno of Katusha rounding out the top five.